The golden age of fast food is over. Do you remember when these chains were good? I wish Zoomers could have experienced Pizza Hut in the early 90s. Remember you'd get free pizza for reading books? Oh boy, that personal pan pizza with the salad bar and Coke in those red cups. Truly the days. KFC is a sad shadow of what it once was. Thanks, Yum Brands. They also did the same thing to Pizza Hut. I worked at Pizza Hut in high school and the vegetables, dough and sauce were made fresh daily. Now it's all frozen garbage. At one time, the pan pizza was made with the fresh ingredients from that day. Tim Hortons' once private equity came in and ruined it. Nothing is baked in store anymore, it's all microwaved garbage. Tim's is such a confused place. Like pizza? Microwaved breakfast bowls? What the heck are they thinking? Plus, their coffee tastes awful. Panera. When I was a kid in the 2000s, there was a Panera under the movie theater, and I'd have so many fond memories of getting 2 You Pick 2s with my mum before the movie, and the bill would be less than $20 for the two of us. Most of the time, the Panera was less than 2 sets of movie snacks. Now it's $15 for one, the portions are far smaller, and I'm hungry at the end of my meal. Alright, I'm just gonna say it. American children's immune systems went to heck once they got rid of the McDonald's ball pits. That ball pit was basically an immunization shot. These days, the music festival porta potty is the best that I can do. Oh, I think you mean the pee pits. I had a family member that was a GM at Hardee's. He'd advise anyone to never go in or have their kids go in the ball pits. When McDonald's would clean those, the amount of urine sometimes found at the bottom was, it was much higher than you'd like to think. I experienced multiple times where the ball pit was closed because a kid had taken a dump in it. Even as a 7-year-old, I was dumbfounded as to how that was a regular occurrence. Dunkin' Donuts, just called Dunkin' now, dropped far and fast at the end of the 90s. I remember them cracking eggs for egg sandwiches in 1996. Tim Hortons decimated them in Canada, and then Tim went to complete crap not long after. Guys, I'm being brought up to the realization that we might have experienced the end of good takeaway in our lifetime. I mean, sure, it was always horrible for you before, but at least it was cheap and they had all the tasty chemicals. Now it's expensive and bad for you, and we know those chemicals are toxic instead of living in happy ignorance. Truly the worst of times. Kids, gather round and listen. Burger King used to flame-broil burgers and then serve it to you. You once could see the fire in the back, I remember. Now it's flame-broiled and then put in a warming slot and reheated in a microwave if need be. The company was sold and resold several times to, drumroll, private equity. Boo! Each time, it was cost-cutting and efficiency experts being bought in to make changes. Those changes were never for the better. I used to look forward to a Burger King when traveling on the road. These days, I don't even bother. I can microwave a burger at home if I want to. Most of these have become so expensive that they're unattractive options for the quality of the product that you get. That, and most of the places near me have the surliest people working at them. All in all, I'm generally no longer going to any. Look, if I'm going to pay $15 for a burger, fries, and a Coke, I can get a better burger for pretty much the same price getting it at Chili's or some other actual restaurant. People are like, oh, but all the deals are on the app. Yeah, I don't want 13 gosh darn fast food apps tracking me, taking up space, and draining my battery. I don't want to spend a half hour checking each one for the best deal. Subway. They were amazing back when they had the actual New York subway maps and newspaper wallpaper. I worked at my local Subway back in the day. The owner was amazing and incredibly strict, in the best possible way, about everything. It was always so clean there. Everything measured and the setups were done properly. If anything was even the slightest bit off, he'd say, "Get rid of it." We always scored perfectly on corporate inspections, and perfect was the expected standard. I actually live a block from that same Subway now, and I never go in there anymore. It's an awful shame. Add on whatever corporate garbage Subway has done to their product, and it's brutal to see the decline of that particular store. Wendy's. I don't know if it's low pay or management issues from the top down. Customer service is completely out. Wendy's died with Dave. And when they got rid of their yellow packaging and sunrooms, and 99-cent junior bacon cheeseburgers, oh, and the buffet. Okay, this franchise died more than Sean Bean. I don't think people realize the magic that Chipotle had in like 2008. Going there felt like you were stepping into the future of food. There was a tight menu, it always hit the spot. You'd drag friends who had never been before. My, how the mighty fall. During their peak in the mid-2000s, they'd have lines going out the door at mealtime. The last few times I was disappointed, and I haven't been in years. I think Quiznos was vastly superior to Subway at the start. Then, I didn't go there for like a year. When next I went back, it was more expensive and of much lower quality. So yeah, I killed Quiznos. Sorry guys. I don't remember exactly what happened, but Quiznos corporate really screwed over the franchises. And that's why they vanished overnight. They basically were running a pyramid scheme where corporate was making their money off soaking the franchisees instead of making money from the food. Really bizarre way to run things. If you ask me, if Wendy's ever wants a turnaround, they should really bring back the Super Bar. I mean, Jack in the Box is coming back from the brink, but all of those deaths hurt them for a while. Wait a minute, there were deaths? Yeah, there was an E. coli outbreak way back in the early 90s. They intentionally undercooked the meat so it would be more tender, and people died. Huh, I still love their tacos, consistently good. To be honest, their burgers have always fascinated me. They actually get served to you looking almost identical to the ones on the menu pictures instead of some compressed, mushy monstrosity. Impressive, actually. Plus, the seasoned curlies are fantastic. Burger King. Their restaurants in Florida look like slums. Chipotle used to be awesome, now they're all about their own profits and shareholders. Buffalo Wild Wings. I loved their Buffalo Ranch chicken sandwich. I had one at least once a week. They changed the bun and the chicken to some awful cheap alternative. I will never step foot into BWW again until it gets changed back. This was a go-to for me and my friends as well in college, and I'd go there a couple of times a month. Sometime right before the pandemic, things started changing. They changed from baskets to the metal trays. The pricing for wings changed from per piece to priced by size portion. There were fewer and fewer specials. Eventually, the food started getting noticeably worse to the point where it wasn't enjoyable. I've gone once each past year to different locations, and both times the wings were so incredibly dry and small. I've been searching all of your answers for Culver's, and I didn't find a single comment, which is correct because they remain king. The big difference is that it's still a privately owned company, with the family that founded it having majority ownership. Zaxby's. Growing up, it was bangin'. I went the other week, and the quality was so bad, especially for what I paid. Tim Hortons once had fresh-baked donuts in every store. It was glorious. Now, the best you can expect is a condensation-draped, thawed-out, dried urinal cake that passes for a pastry. I'm surprised nobody here is saying Sonic. I live in Philly, and I only knew of one of them when I was growing up, but it closed down. I haven't seen one around here in years, and when I'm around an area that has one, nobody ever says, let's go to Sonic. All of them, which is the right answer. Crapification. It does seem to be that way. I don't know if the answer lies once again in private equity, the dissonance in our mind between what things should cost and the actual reality of inflation, or a mixture of those two and any number of awful reasons that this planet is getting worse to live on. Yay! Baskin-Robbins. Most don't even have 15 flavors. Forget 31. McDonald's. It's horrible food now, and the prices are ridiculous. It's so bad that not even their CEO will eat it. It's absolute crap in 2026. Like, it wasn't ever healthy, but Big Macs were big, cheeseburgers filled up an 8-year-old, and the fries were bigger and you got more than you could finish. Today, every single burger is smaller than it was and twice as much money. And most of the dining rooms are unkept and gross. McDonald's is a symbol of everything wrong with American capitalism. The one and only driving goal is profit margin. Wendy's. Used to be solid, and now it's garbage. The ones that are dying are due to PE, private equity. They buy out the owners, make them rich, and then they start trimming away. My best example is Jersey Mike's. Used to be really fat subs for the price. PE steps in and you're getting half of that meat now. No one pays attention, but PE is just profit-driven. They don't care about the industry. They find something great, buy it for the name recognition, and then frickin' ruin it. Pretty much all of them. In and Out remain consistent, but that's the only one I can think of that can say as much. I've randomly come across certain places where the franchises gave a crap, and it showed. But one big problem with most fast food is that it isn't consistent from one place to another, or even at one location depending on who's working. Before most of you were born, Burger King actually had decent food. Of all of them that have been encrapificationized into mediocrity, Sonic is easily the worst off in my opinion. I remember going there in the 80s and early 90s, and it was like being in an alternate universe compared to now. Subway, and it's not even close. Absolute scum. I beg to differ. Quiznos had one of the worst downfalls of all time. Pizza Hut from the early 70s. They had an Italian sausage sandwich that was the best grinder I've ever had. Then they changed meat suppliers and everything went to hell. KFC by far. Back in the 70s and mid-80s, KFC's chicken was really special. It tasted like no other chicken, but now it tastes like mass-produced trash. Colonel Sanders would not be proud. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I'm enjoying reading this. I'm also noticing that nearly every fast food restaurant I can think of is on here somewhere. It seems the fall-off is nearly universal. Private equity greed has ruined them all. It's truly an epidemic. All of them. I can eat cheaper at some Thai restaurants or grab a couple of tacos at a taqueria. Whataburger has seriously slipped since a corporation bought them out. P. Terry's is where Texans go now. Whataburger is more like what a letdown. Taco Bell. Quality has dropped off, or I've just become more picky. But we can all agree the prices are insane either way, right? I didn't mind the quality when it was cheap. It was a guilty pleasure, if you will. Spending little money to eat crap food. Now it's like they think their product is quality. I still enjoy their food when someone else gets it for me, which is like never. Kentucky Fried Chicken just dropped off a cliff. They used to be a way to celebrate something. Now they're a punishment. I hate to answer this way, but quite literally all of them. Even before COVID, but it hit them hard and they are far from recovered. The latest attempt at having AI take orders through their busted intercoms is a cherry on top. That last one is KFC. McDonald's is just awful now. What do you expect with a CEO that constantly refers to their food as a product? Carl's Jr. I don't know, man. The famous star has felt pretty consistent for me in the past 20 years or so, but I've definitely had an issue with their fries over the years. But the strawberry cheesecake is still an absolute banger. Del Taco. Went from having the best cheese and excellent ground beef to the best cheese and TB quality ground meat. Wawa took away everything I loved and turned everything else into garbage. That's so sad to hear. I haven't been to a Wawa in almost 20 years since I moved away from that region that had them. I used to go once a week on a late-night run just for their subs. They were so delicious. Better question. Which fast food chain hasn't fallen off badly? Step 1. Make a great product. Step 2. Build a loyal customer base. Step 3. Reduce quality, increase prices. Step 4. Profit. And Step 5. Repeat steps 3 and 4 until the brand dies a slow, ugly death. I'll say that Popeyes, Culver's, Panda Express, and Jimmy John's are still all consistent for me. I haven't noticed a notable decline in quality the past decade the way that Subway, T-Bell, KFC, and stuff have noticeably declined. 90s KFC was the bomb. I can remember it in my memories. Now, dear Lord. The only major ones that have been surviving, at least on the East Coast, are McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and Chick-fil-A. These other new viral ones like Raising Cane's, Zaxby's, and others, I feel are trying too hard to be popular, but will go under easily as many want healthier options, and because of rising food costs and declining quality. McDonald's is basically a completely different restaurant brand at this point versus the 80s and 90s. Hardly any more playgrounds, no supersize, rest in peace Morgan Spurlock, no self-serve soda, no front-facing employees, no more Ronald, Grimace, or the rest, no more collectible merch like cups and plates and stuff. Back in the day, you could ignore the mediocre food for the experience. Now it's crap food at dine-in restaurant prices. It used to be a cool place to have a birthday party. Now kids don't want to step foot in that place. Yep, we're once again at the point where, due to the need to fill 20 minutes of content and the limited scope of the question, we do have some repeat opinions. However, there are still tidbits of info to be had here in the tasty, moist rear end of the video, like the removal of McDonald's playgrounds, which is sad, but probably good for reducing the average child's consumption of other children's bodily fluids. So let's take our silver linings here. God, I do not miss working at McDonald's. Look, I don't want to name names, but I'll just say that they peaked at a $5 footlong. It's all crap everywhere, especially Wendy's. Wendy's used to be the absolute best, and now it's at the bottom of the barrel in a barrel full of garbage. Price completely aside, it's still trash, and now it's insanely overpriced trash. Taco Bell still hits the spot though. It tastes pretty much like it always has, and I'm not upset when I see the price. To counteract that last guy, Taco Bell. Chalupas were great when they first came out. They've gone downhill since. Not fresh like they used to be, and they tend to crack and fall apart after the first bite. KFC is absolute garbage in my town. Never, ever again. I don't know how they stay open. Burger King was great back in the day. It's a shell of their former selves now. Okay, since Pizza Hut has been mentioned a bunch of times, I'll mention Round Table Pizza. It's West Coast only, but they used to have wood-fired ovens and use cornstarch to keep the crust from sticking. Gave it a nice crunch and finish. Now they use the same conveyor system as all other pizza chains. Panera's. Back until the early 2010s, they had a really solid breakfast menu. Then they made a turn for the worst, and now it's all boring. Taco Bell is straight poop and expensive. They have no business charging what they do for a taco that has dropped so far in quality I wouldn't pay yesteryear's 59 cents for one today. It did let me discover the glory of Del Taco though. Don't sleep on their burgers. You can't find White Castle except in the freezer aisle now. They're like the opposite of Subway or Starbucks. They'll barely put two in the same state. But they are around, and as far as I know, not hurting in terms of business. The closest one for me is 2 hours away, which is probably for the better. I'm a weak man. I'm in my 40s, and White Castle has been a special treat my entire life. Never lived near one, so it feels a little special. If I had one near me, I would have worn myself out on it years ago. Let me tell you now, they all suck. Support your mum and pops and local businesses instead of fast food trash. Jimmy John's, another case of private equity not understanding or caring about the brand. Chipotle. 20 years ago, they used high-quality ingredients and was a third of the price that it is now. Popeyes. 5 years ago, it was nice, at least from my memory. Now their chicken is dry, the breading falls right off, half the time it's cold and undercooked, and the other half I get a money shot of juice that burns to the bone and the chicken is black. The only good thing they have going for them is the biscuits. But who knows how long that'll take before they mess that one up. Oh, and their chicken is a great laxative. I'll say Quiznos. When it was first popping up in my state and area in the late 90s and early 2000s, I remember I could get a large, and a friend of mine and I could split it and still be full. They were always more expensive than Subways or other fast foods, but I remember the quality was great. Fast forward a few years, their large is now smaller than what the medium used to be, and it was more expensive. I swore off Quiznos at that point. Raising Cane's. It was bomb from 2015 to 18. After that, it started losing its original flavor over the years, and once it started popping up everywhere, it was nowhere near as good as it once was. Taco Hell is truly a disappointment. Haven't been there for a few years since the disappearance of 2-for-1 tacos, and even that was barely a deal. Everything else was just too expensive. Judging from other people's posts here, it's gotten much worse. Nobel Romans used to have cool restaurants and they'd spin and flip pizzas and play old movies. For those of you in Chicago, you already know it's Portillo's. It was awesome, and now it's Possum. They really fell off a cliff after Berkshire Partners bought them. Tim Hortons here in Canada. Time was that we could introduce any visitors to Canada with its authentic Canadian cuisine, coffee and donuts. Then a few years ago, it was bought by Restaurant Brands International, and the food quality took a very sudden, very steep, and very deep dive. Now, the coffee is dishwater, and the food is basically cardboard heated up with a few flavorings added. Canadians know that the ultimate answer is Tim Hortons. It's an empty husk of what it once was, eh? Little Caesars was delicious in the 80s, the dough was bubbly and airy, the ingredients were way better quality. It has been epically encrapified since then. Panera is on its way there fast after being acquired by private equity. Chipotle had been known as the Subway killer, and now it's become just as crappy as Subway, but somehow Subway got even worse. It's been a real race to the bottom all round when it comes to fast food chains. A fast food world case of, if I die, I'm taking you with me, huh? Well, from what I know about Subway, it's deserved to die for a long time now. I just hope that the franchisers who were conned in there can get out from under their corporate overlords with as little damage as possible when it finally collapses in its ungraceful, wheezing, diarrhea-induced death. All low-tier fast food chains, we're talking McDonald's and Wendy's and stuff, they forgot their place and they're way too expensive. Arby's worst beef. I'll just say that you don't like their roast beef. You know that they have other items too. They have incredible gyros for a fast food chain, that's why no one else has been mentioning them. Long John Silver. It's globally terrible, which is actually pretty hard to do. They appeared in 22 countries, and only 5 are left today. Oh my god, those poor 17 countries. Bought low by Long John Silver's. The only time I ever crapped myself as an adult was after eating at Long John's. I swear the oil from the food just lubed up my intestines, turning my insides into a turd slip and slide. Never trusted a toot after that day again.
Forensic scientists, what is the most WTF case that you ever had? A friend of mine is a CSI, and I don't know if he's posted here, but just in case he hasn't, I'll put this here. Anchorage, Alaska, 2008. A 27-year-old woman hasn't paid her rent in 4 months. The landlord gave her a bit of a reprieve because he knew she was very poor and she was in low-income housing. But after 4 months of zero contact, enough is enough, and he calls the cops to get into her place and either see her to talk or change the locks and remove her stuff to a storage shed so the apartment can be released to someone else. The cops find the front door to be bolted and use the landlord's key to get in, then find the woman dead in her shower, just sort of slumped as if she fell against the wall and slid down. The water wasn't on, and as this is Alaska and in the winter, the water is never shut off by the city because if hot water isn't moving through the pipes, they freeze and burst. The fact that her shower is off means she never turned it on or someone turned it off. The body is taken to the morgue and autopsied at the family's request because no obvious means of death can be found. As far as the examination could conclude, she died from an adrenal surge causing her heart to stop, more commonly known as frightened to death, which yes, can actually happen in some rare cases. The body was old, but no test showed any residual illegal substances in her system. None were found in the apartment, nor was there any sign of anyone having entered or left before the cops. The young, pretty average health woman appears to have gotten into her shower, and then her heart stopped due to terror. As far as I know, that's where the story ends. No substantial evidence. When I was pretty young, I got into all of the procedural crime shows and stuff like CSI, Law and Order, just all those things, so I'm kind of interested in this topic. A friend of mine is a forensic scientist and her department dealt with burglary cases only, usually generating pretty uninteresting stuff to tell people. But her only good story is that once she got a pair of gloves found at a crime scene. She went to examine them and felt that there was something hard inside. She turned the gloves up to get it out and out falls a thumb, ripped off at the first joint. Apparently this particular burglar was holding up a safe while his mate went underneath it, dropped the safe on his hand, ripped his hand out and ran. They obviously caught the guy. The only interesting story they have, kind of rude, but I wonder if whoever caught them was like, so, was it worth it? A friend is a psychologist whose previous life was in crime scene photography. She went to the scene of a self-deletion in a garage. This guy had a project car that he worked on his whole life. When he decided to end it all, he wanted to go with the car. So he shut the garage and turned on the engine and waited. To top it off, he had taken a bunch of pain and sleeping pills. When my friend got there, it was a good while after his death. EMTs and other specialists were there looking for details and whatnot. He was the VP of a fairly large chain of local businesses, so there was an insurance settlement to consider. My friend is in the middle of photographing the scene and the guy was laying there, pronounced dead hours ago, and he suddenly just shook hard. She thought it was a death rattle, so she kept taking pictures. Eventually, the guy sat up and nodded, and the EMTs were called back in to stabilize him and eventually save him. Apparently, the car had run out of gas right at the moment he went out, and he was pronounced dead on the scene. He couldn't talk or do much, but he had actually survived. I don't know what the laws are in Alaska. I was gonna say say he was lucky, but then I thought about the fact that he's probably being arrested for attempting self-deletion. Forensic chemist here who occasionally gets called out to crime scenes just to consult on evidence collection. On the first one I ever went on, a father had killed his adult son and put the body in a deep freeze that was in his bedroom. There were a ton of cops and the other people from our lab there, but when the coroner asked for help removing the body from the freezer, I volunteered quickly, as I had never been that close to a dead body, other than funerals, and was curious. As I helped the coroner lift the body out of the freezer, which still had a bunch of food in it too, a pack of frozen biscuits was stuck to his body. I had to pry them off of him, which was both very weird and kind of funny at the same time. I often ponder, like so many other people do, what my final moments will define me as in the face of those who know and love me, as well as strangers who may be there to witness my downfall or whatever. And there are people who obviously you know and care about, who love you, that will remember you fondly, and then there are people like this who are just like, oh yeah, that guy who got biscuits stuck to him. Tragic story though. EMT here. We had a guy who was naked, bloodied, and tortured, then left outside in -10-degree weather until he froze. We found him literally frozen maybe a day after the fact. Now, my question is, how the hell do you move a 230-pound popsicle without breaking it? Very, very carefully, I imagine? I interned at the office of the chief medical examiner when I was 18, saw a lot of interesting stuff, learned a lot of interesting things. One case stuck with me more than the rest. I arrived one morning, went down to the basement where bodies were laid out for rounds every morning. On tables lay the usual, a couple of folks who died in the hospital and needed a partial autopsy to sign off on a death certificate, an illegal substance overdose, an illegal substance murder. Then, on one table, there was a blue Tupperware bin, a big one, about 3 by 3 by 2. It was filled with concrete, and out of the edges a little plastic wrap was lining between the concrete and the bin. And then, out of the top of the concrete, a couple of toes were poking out. The story was, out in the country, a family saw a small fire in the woods outside of their house. They called the fire department, and after putting out the flames, they found this bin. When we cracked the bin open, we found half of a man, about from the belly button down. Someone had thought the best way to dispose of this body would be to cut it in half, wrap it in plastic, put it in a Tupperware bin, fill the bin with concrete, and set it on fire. What they had really done was essentially cook the body in an oven with the plastic wrap acting as a roasting bag. Skin was sloughing off of the legs and feet, and the skin was discolored by this time, a nice green. Though this was about 10 years ago, I still distinctly remember being able to make out saw marks on the top edge of this half, however. Notes were taken and no signs of death were found on the legs and no indication of the person's identity either. Unfortunately, my internship ended a few weeks before they found the top half, so I never got to learn more about the case, but the image still certainly sticks with me till now. I once considered doing an internship at a morgue myself, but you know what? Some of the things you'd see in there would probably just, like they said, stick with you for the rest of your life, or at least a really long time. I'm not a forensic scientist, but did forensic anthropology as part of my degree. When handling a rib cage, a ton of flakes came off and ended up lodged in my mouth, nose, and eyes thanks to a friend. Yummy, flaky rib cage bits. Forensic genetic in Mexico. I've seen some serious stuff. I was assigned to the identification of mass graves, over 300 bodies, dismembered, scattered, and burnt. It was just one site. We had many. I'm gonna presume that's the work of the cartels. Stepfather used to be a police officer and loves telling stories about crime scenes. He went on to tell us about how after a motorcycle rider was struck by a train, he went under the wheel. His torso was found about 30 feet from his legs. They were connected by an intestine, so he picked up one end of the intestine and started to wrap it up like a rope. I defer back to the young man who had frozen biscuits stuck to his dead body. Just imagine that. You're dead on the floor and some guy's just wrapping up your intestines like he's putting away the garden hose. It's a rather surreal thought. My cousin is a coroner and the worst was he came to get a body in a trailer during the summer. Man had been dead at least a week and it had burst. He said the smell was the worst of his life. He and the other guys were up to their ankles in fluids and had to throw out his clothes and shoes. His boss felt so bad that he bought them each a new pair of like $300 shoes. I was literally watching Seven last night. It's a film with young Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Do not recommend it for the faint of heart. And that's what I'm picturing. Like the crime scenes in it are super gritty and horrible. Like you would not want to be there. And that's what I'm imagining this trailer as. Not me, but there was a great case that I can't currently find on Google. I hope it was true. A woman was found dead in her bed with blood everywhere, and I mean everywhere. There were wine glasses or drinking glasses throughout the house with blood in them. I think blood may have been been smeared about as well. So the investigators assumed some bizarre ritual, a gang of people, the whole 9 yards. Long story short, she had some strange clotting problems and was bleeding out of her mouth for an extended period of time. She probably got hazy from the loss of blood and was just trying not to make a mess in her house, so she kept spitting the blood in glasses. Eventually, she was overcome and died in her bed. I only hope it was true because I don't want to propagate lies. I was about to say out of context the whole "I hope it's true" is a bit weird. I did an internship at a PD one year. I got to be with a forensic team for a week. I got to see the aftermath of what a stabbing looks like. A 113 stab wound aftermath. Yes, 113 is correct. Unreal amounts of blood. I used a kitchen knife. Upon first inspection, it appeared like a dozen because there was so much blood on the body they couldn't tell how many there actually was. Gruesome. I actually personally know someone who was almost decapitated in a similarly excessive and brutal way. They survived and they were a very nice person. They moved away a good long while ago and, well, I hope they're doing well. I regularly post on Unsolved Mysteries, so I thought this was fitting here. One of the best cases on Forensic Files was a cold case that had gone unsolved for decades. A man told police he had picked up a hitchhiker in the evening. After the man and the hitchhiker got into a fight, the man threw him out of his car 2 miles away from his mother's house on a busy highway. The man later came home to his mother's house only to find the hitchhiker at his mother's house. He left to go call the police from a payphone. This was before cell phones. The police found his mother dead in bed. The man was a beneficiary of a huge life insurance policy and was the prime suspect. The cops or anyone did not believe the man's story. It was inconceivable that the hitchhiker, who did not know where the mother's house was, could make a 2-mile journey which turns in a neighborhood to just randomly break in and kill the man's mother who he didn't know. But there was blood at the scene and a palm print on the staircase that was not the man's nor the mother's. After some investigation, people at Hardee's did confirm that there was a man that fit the description looking to hitchhike. Still, they just assumed the man had paid the other man to kill his mother. 15 years later, after the invention of CODIS, the DNA was matched to a career criminal who definitely matched the description of the hitchhiker. After bringing him in and interrogating him, the killer had no idea he had killed the mother of the man who gave him a ride. He simply walked through this neighborhood looking for a house that looked empty, and his mother's was the only one without the lights on. It's baffling. It also sounds like just plain awful luck. I was at a regional medical center in rural Guatemala when we had a case come in from an RTA, road traffic accident, involving a pedestrian and a chicken bus. For those who don't know, a popular but incredibly dangerous form of public transport are retired American school buses that have been painted all sorts of vibrant colors, but underneath, the mechanics are shot to hell. Anyway, this pedestrian had been hit by one of these rolling death traps, which was fully loaded going around 80 miles per hour, and ended up getting wrapped under the front right wheel arch and completely mangled beyond recognition. They found bits of this guy spread 2 kilometers down the road, and the initial impact had split his torso down the middle and basically turned him inside out. When all the bits had been collected, the height of the body bag was around 2 inches, so you can imagine the state of the remains. Passers-by helped us pick up bits from the side of the road, but dogs and cats ran off with a fair amount of the smaller bits. Guatemala is a cool place. First of all, I also never heard of a chicken bus. I assumed it was literally that, a bus for chickens to be transported to wherever chickens need be. Second of all, my God, he was bloody... there's barely anything left of him if that's the case. Not a forensic scientist, but I majored in anthropology, with a focus on forensic anthropology. Given that, I was a fairly regular reader of the Forensic Science Quarterly. Here are a couple that I remember. Kid found on top of an elevator in a 6-story dorm. Apparently, he was elevator surfing, which is just as dumb as it sounds. He somehow got his head caught in the cables and got it twisted around a couple of times. This did not immediately kill him. He died from asphyxiation, which means he had anywhere from 30 to a couple of minutes to contemplate what had happened to him before he lost consciousness. Another one was sort of a mystery case. Headless corpse found in a truck in a national park. No head was to be found in the immediate area. Truck was turned on but had run out of gas. The wound was very clean, no sawing, almost like a guillotine cut. The investigating authorities were rather confused, but eventually they found a receipt in his pocket for 50 yards of nylon rope. They widened the investigation and eventually found the rope tied to a tree with a noose at the end. Further searching of this area eventually turned up the head. Pretty unique method of self-deletion. Mystery solved. This one isn't from the magazine, but a story personally relayed to me from the officer involved. A call comes in for a 50-ish black woman dead in a garage. Investigation reveals it is actually a 35-year-old white male. Dude put on a dress, rigged a noose to his garage door opener, and proceeded to watch some smut in his garage while choking himself with the garage door opener. Battery in the remote died, and then so did he. I am reminded of an episode of BoJack Horseman. I had a professor who was an expert in osteology and would train radiologists and doctors to recognize defensive fractures in arm bones. Defending yourself from an attack can leave a very distinctive spiral fracture on your forearm, and in his years of research, he'd never encountered that specific fracture pattern anywhere except in a defensive wound. Until he was attending a seminar at the University of Toronto in February, and when leaving the lecture, he was walking down an outdoor flight of stairs when someone called out to him to ask a question. He had his hands in his pockets because he wasn't wearing gloves, turned, slipped, and fell while perpendicular to the steps. His forearm hit the step and resulted in the exact spiral fracture he'd never seen anywhere else. And best part is that the radiologist that examined him was someone he himself trained to look for this sort of fracture as a warning sign for domestic violence. I'm picturing the dude who fell goes in, his student or former student, the radiologist examines him and is like, "Sir, has your wife been hitting you?" A bit late, but this is my area, so why not go for it? I'm in third year as a forensic anthropology student, so I don't have my own cases yet, but I've studied hundreds and have been told about some. My professor in advanced forensic methods was one of the leads in the case of Anthony Hardy, who basically killed people, dismembered them, and put their body parts in bins that were eventually found by a homeless guy. Another one she worked on, actually all I'm going to list were ones she was involved with, involved a man who went to park his car in his garage as he normally did, but his wife's car was in the spot. She refused to move it, so naturally, he stabbed her about 17 times, put her in his boot, and drove off. He explained the bloodstains away as being animal blood of something he'd hit, carried home in his boot, and cut it up on the garage floor. Obviously, this was a crap excuse, as simple blood testing showed it was human. She ran us through the forensics involved in that case, and it was quality stuff. One was a man found with his wrist and throat cut sitting on the floor of his living room. Depressed old man. Self-deletion, right? Wrong. The cut to his throat stopped halfway across and was at an unusual angle. The stopping halfway through is a good sign of holding someone from behind, reaching around and slitting the throat. Stopping halfway is in that position, it's much harder to fight a struggle. Also, the wrist wound had very little blood and was evidently done after the throat slit. The way he was sat showed that it was likely a loved one, as his body was taken care of, as strange as that sounds, and placed in a loving position. Possibly the weirdest one, a woman was found dead in the hole at the bottom of the stairs with blunt force trauma to the skull. There was a large hole in the ceiling above her, and the situation told to the forensic team by the police is that she fell through the loft. In the loft, no boxes were moved, and there were loads around the site of the hole. If she fell, she would have grabbed out, right? More damning, it was clear, by some sawdust in the state of the slats, that someone had used a saw to cut through the wood. Also, the blood splatter on the wall was all wrong. Basically, what had happened was that her husband had smashed her head in, put her at the bottom of the stairs, cut a hole in the loft, called the police, and told them of the accident. He also tried to kill the family liaison officer in the kitchen when the police were there after he realized the jig was up. Seen a lot more stuff than that. Self-deletions that look like murders but no evidence found, vice versa, bodies found in burnt buildings, bodies found in swamps or moors from years back, terrible labs for the production of illegal substances, even got sort of taught how to make illegal substances actually. Mass graves, photos, grapes, murder victims, it's pretty grim at times. I'm just picturing the dude who left his wife at the bottom of the stairs and everything thinking, oh yeah, I'm smart, I'm real smart, I'm like a Columbo villain. From a family friend, people who do lots of yoga involving rolling their heads around the axis of their neck, over time it wears away the corners of the vertebrae, which is why you're not supposed to do it. He saw a few cases of people getting into relatively minor car crashes. What should have been a nasty case of whiplash instead becomes fatal, as their spine was weakened and can't stop the momentum of their head. So it just pops right off of the spinal column. The head doesn't fly away or anything, it's still held on by muscle, but the driver is just as dead. I gotta be be honest, through all of the violent descriptions of the things that happen to people in this, I'm just getting like a blast of like the X-rays from Mortal Kombat or something of whatever I'm describing. It's crazy. I'm not even a Mortal Kombat fan. I'm more of a Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue guy. Hell, if you catch me in the right mood, I might want to play Dead or Alive more than friggin' Mortal Kombat. An ex-journalist once told me the story that got him out of journalism. He covered a story where there was a house fire. Police suspected arson. Then they discovered the body of a young girl in the house. It was not the owner's, but a local girl whose mom was a junkie. Turned out that the mother was pimping her daughter out to the owner. Some local residents knew he was a nonce and set fire to his house, killing him and the girl. That's just sad. I mean, I don't give a crap what happens to a nonce, but the kid, oh man. I'm a wound researcher, currently specializing in genetic changes along wound healing phases. Forensics does a lot of research into this, as the progression of a wound reveals a lot about time of death, conditions, etc. Prior to this, I had worked with cadavers and stuff, majored in neuropsych, preemed roots, so lots of bloody stuff. I thought that I had a low squeamish index, as I see most stuff as a part of life. Holy crap, these studies I am reviewing right now. Apparently, a lot of people have massive chronic wounds that go untreated for a long time because they're diabetic, and A, don't have the proper vasculature for proper nociceptor function, and B, don't care enough about their bodies. So forensics can help differentiate whether a wound existed prior to death or not, and studies also look at different subpopulations to show wound progression in general, and some studies show graphic pictures to depict this. Seeing a morbidly obese man's leg split open like a wilted banana peel put me off work for a day. I couldn't crop the picture out and I scrapped the paper from consideration because the images comparing injury progression and chronic wound changes post-death were full of the most messed up diabetic wounds. I get that it's not a grisly murder, but I can handle that sort of stuff. I feel empathy for combat wound research I cover, and I don't recoil from any of those cases. Pressure ulcers don't flinch me. But diabetic wounds? I need to get back into brains. I checked some of the examples of wounds that this individual talked about, and yeah, they're all pretty gross. And yeah, the diabetic wounds are pretty damn bad. Worked a burglary one time where the homeowner left in the morning and came back to discover their house had been broken into during the day. Normal things were stolen, electronics, cash, jewelry, etc. But what was left behind is a head scratcher. The burglar took a dump on the toilet seat cover and then covered it nearly with a towel. The victim wanted it collected for DNA processing. Nope. Forensics swapped it and left it for the homeowners to handle. I gave them some latex gloves and wished them luck. Full disclosure, I'm a cop, not forensics.
Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the craziest rule or punishment you had to deal with? When I was in first grade, I had a writing homework assignment. My dad used to be weird about me erasing because he wanted me to do it right the first time. I ended up erasing a lot on this homework, and my dad took the paper from me, ripped it in half, and told me to start over. Turns out it was the last sheet of paper in the entire house, and I don't remember why, but for some reason we couldn't go and buy more paper that night. So, ironically, I ended up having to completely erase an old homework assignment in order to have a sheet of paper to start over on. I'm 22 now and still give him crap about this. How is starting over on a new piece of paper any different than erasing what you were already doing? I don't really understand the logic on this one. The word disgusting was banned and could have been considered just as bad as saying the F word. We weren't allowed to close doors unless we were in the bathroom. We weren't allowed to watch Cartoon Network because it was garbage. They actually put a parental lock on Cartoon Network. The worst punishment was one time they decided that we were such bad kids, my sister was like 14 and I was 12-ish, that they took everything we owned and bagged it up into garbage bags and made us carry them out to a burn pile, and they burnt everything we owned. All of my childhood memorabilia, pictures, clothes, diaries, everything. All of it burnt. It was kind of messed up. When it was done burning, the next day or so later, my sister and I looked through the ashes, and all that was left were 2 silver rings of hers that we cleaned off and kept. It was kind of crazy. I once got beaten and locked in the basement because my hands were literally not large enough to play a certain piano piece. I couldn't play an octave separation yet. Before you ask, yes, I am Asian. I didn't ask, but makes sense. I wasn't allowed to use public restrooms. I ruined our Disney trip because of how many times we had to go back to the hotel, which wasn't on site. And I was 6 years old at the time. I quite honestly had accidents when I was far too old to do so because my parents had my teachers reporting bathroom use to them too. There was no place I could safely use the restroom other than home. Without getting into trouble, that is. Finally, I got to use public restrooms without punishment when I went to college. No, I'm not kidding. But I got pretty good at hiding restroom use in high school because the high school refused to report it to my parents. Why did none of these teachers spot the abuse? My parents once grounded me for 2 years for getting a B on my report card. Took everything out of my room besides the bed, and I wasn't allowed to do anything with friends. A year and a half into it, I asked if I could be ungrounded. And at that point, they had actually forgotten what they'd grounded me for, but refused because I must have done something bad if they grounded me. Also, they refused to let me stay up past 8 p.m., even in high school. If it's not important enough for you to remember, then it's not important enough to take away all of your kids' stuff for 2 whole years. When I was in elementary school at about 6 years old, I used to have accidents because my bladder was too small. My mom would punch me in the bladder when I got home to make me pee myself and make fun of me when I did. I still have issues, and it turns out that my bladder and uterus is messed up from a genetic disease. That's actually just messed up. No talking at the dinner table other than the occasional "do you want some more blank" or "pass the blank." We couldn't talk about anything at all. No small or idle chat was allowed. First time you did it, you got yelled at. Second time was a whooping and then sent to your room until the next day, without the rest of your meal. I make it a point now with my kids to chat up a storm each and every meal. You could earn a full-on whooping for uttering any of the following: shut up, but, or accusing someone of lying for any reason. We were not permitted to use the words lie, liar, or lying. Instead, we had to say, "That's not the truth," or "That doesn't sound right," or any other phraseology that wasn't some iteration of the word lie. This sounds like there's some deeper damage going on in your parents' psyche around the word lie. Otherwise, I don't see why they'd be so sensitive about the word. As the eldest son of a Southern Baptist preacher, I was held to some high standards. Being seen and not heard, and that my every action was a reflection of my father as a leader to his congregation. I found music to be a great outlet, but of course any non-Christian music was not allowed and immediately destroyed upon discovery. Spare the rod, spoil the child was a mantra ingrained in my daily life. Once I was into my teens and spankings with stretched out coat hangers was no longer enough to be considered punishment due to the lack of tears, my father moved on to shaving my head. Nothing like the constant reminder of how untrustworthy one is once their physical source of personal identity is forcibly removed. As soon as you said Southern Baptist preacher, I knew this was going to be bad. My mother is an honest-to-God narcissist. I graduated from high school early at 16 and didn't go to college immediately, so I worked a part-time job while all my friends went to school. Anyways, when all my friends graduated high school, we celebrated by going to the movies. My friend's mom dropped us off and another friend's father was going to be picking us up. My mom was very upset at me going to the movie anyways, since it wasn't going to be over until after 9 p.m., by bedtime at the time. Anyways, finally she lets me go on the condition that my friend's dad gets me home by 10 p.m. My friend's father ran into late-night construction on the way home with me and several other friends in the van, and the closer it got to 10 p.m., the more I started freaking out, telling everyone I was going to be in huge trouble if I didn't get home like right now. My friend's father assured me he would speak to my mom and all would be fine. I was the first to be dropped off because I was panicking so severely. The moment the van pulls into the driveway, my mom comes barreling out of the house, telling me she was going to kick my butt for being late and keeping her up. My friend's dad tried to calm her down and separate her from hitting me. That's when she realizes I'm chewing gum. Now, my mother hated gum. Said the only reason you would ever chew gum was to hide something. So naturally, she makes the assumption I was late in chewing gum because I was busy fooling around with my friend's dad. Yeah, that was the only explanation in her mind. She grounded me for 12 weeks, an entire summer. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, cell phone, TV, or books the entire summer. Every morning, my mom would take the cable box, home phone handset, and keyboard to make sure I couldn't do anything. Needless to say, my friends never invited me anywhere again in fear that my mom would call the cops and accuse me of fooling around with their dad. She also used to report my car stolen if I didn't call her back when I was in college. What's going on with your mom that's the first thing that her mind goes to? Who does she think you are? Shouldn't she be more confident in how she raised you? I dealt with a narcissistic and abusive mother, and most of my punishments weren't huge because I was a really good kid. But on my 18th birthday, because I asked for gas money the day before, the first time ever, she took mine and her car keys with her to work, and took the shed key so I couldn't even ride my bike. She left a note on the kitchen table saying, "Happy 18th, now you're an adult, so get out of my house." I spent my birthday alone, trapped, and miserable. All over $10. One day, the news said the school might be closed for a cold day, like a snow day, but when it's cold enough, your exposed skin freezes in less than 10 minutes. My mom demanded I start walking to school or she'd report me to the cops as truant. We argued about it, but the TV said school started late that day. I decided to go anyways. That being better than the arguing. She then decided I was to stay home for her to call the cops. I shoved past her, which she yelled at me was assault, and then locked me out of the house. Halfway to school, I was told the school was closed. I had to call my dad to be let into the house again. That day, I promised myself I'd leave home as soon as possible. I've stayed halfway across the country from my mom ever since. Your mom sounds like the type of person that's just looking for and wants to start problems. I don't blame you for wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. My mom was raised in a very strict and abusive environment. When my sister and I became teenagers, she was struggling with mental health issues and also never had a good example of what level-headed parenting looked like. It doesn't excuse some of the things she did, but I'm more understanding now that I'm older. Anyway, the craziest, most out-of-hand moment. My sister and I are 16 months apart in age and had a lot of the same friends in high school. When I was 14 and she was 15, our curfew was 9, but we got a summertime curfew of 10 o'clock. This was before everyone had a cell phone. Our friend was watching the time, but we got caught up in our night games. We were literally playing hide and seek. We lost track of time and realized at 5 after 10 that we were late, and managed to get home by 10 after. My mom was furious and made us sit down at the kitchen table for a 30-minute lecture, during which she slammed a utensil so hard on a plate in front of my sister that glass shards flew into her face. My sister got up and left the room at that point, but when I tried to do the same, my mom put me in a headlock, like freaking WWE style, and I punched her in the back to get her to let go. My sister and I were both grounded for something like 2 weeks, and I got an extra week for hurting my mom. The most ridiculous punishment? My sister, at age 16, picked up smoking cigarettes. She'd been at it for a week. I told her it was on her own head and that it wasn't worth it and she should stop, but she kept doing it. Whatever, not my problem. She, like an idiot, pressed her luck and brought cigarettes into the house, where my mom found them in her room. Our mom would go through our stuff constantly. I literally had to hide any CD with profanity or things like permanent markers that we could get high off of. They separated us and played good cop, bad cop. My sister, again, the idiot, totally bought it when my mom told her I'd blabbed about everything and they knew the truth. I was in the other room denying any knowledge or involvement. Anyway, this happened a week before summer vacation. My sister was grounded for the entire summer vacation. 2 months, no friends, no going out, 10 minutes of phone time a day, no electronics, no internet, no pool, no movie theater, nothing. My punishment? The exact same thing. For not coming to my parents and telling on my sister. My parents also decided to sand and paint the baseboards that summer and forced us to do it all. That summer was literally the worst. I spent a large portion of my teen years being grounded for minor things, or for not being the sister spy. It sucked, especially considering I got decent if not great grades, never drank, smoked, tried drugs, had sex, skipped class, or otherwise got into any kind of trouble. I'm almost 30 and about to have my second kid, and I'm still a little salty about it. My parents tried so hard to keep us from experiencing normal teenage stuff that both me and my sister made some really poor choices once we had the tiniest amount of freedom. That's something I think a lot of parents aren't aware of, is that the harder you push, the harder they pull away. You're gonna be this super strict about your kid, then yeah, the second they have some freedom, they're gonna go nuts. And they don't know how to control themselves because they've never gotten to enjoy fun before. It makes sense that they're gonna get a little carried away. No TV. Not as a punishment, just no TV, ever. Because apparently it lets the devil in. The second as the last kid moved out, they started watching TV all the time. As punishment, my dad would make us face a corner, stand on one leg, and keep both arms straight up in the air for a certain length of time. If our leg or arms went down, he'd double the time. Sometimes he'd give you a surprise visit from his belt or shoe if he was particularly angry. At least I grew up to have fantastic balance. My grandmother was a retired English teacher. One day, I called my brother stupid. I was 4 or so. She filled me in on her rule that if I couldn't spell stupid, but I called someone stupid, then it was really me that was stupid. Thus, I should never call someone a name that I couldn't spell. So, in my 4-year-old head, rather than avoid name calling, I realized that I did know how to spell the word dumb. So that word must be permitted. I spent the rest of the day overusing the word dumb, and she wasn't quite sure what to do at that point. My mom gave me a black eye one night when I came home from a friend's birthday party at a skate rink. She made me tell people that I fell down and got hit in the eye by one of the wheels on a skate. I was 12. It was because I forgot to put away the dishes before I left. She also regularly broke remote controls, throwing them at me, would slam my doors open so hard the doorknobs would smash through the drywall, stole the allowance my granddad gave me, no matter where I hid it, and recently ripped a pair of my headphones out of my ears while I was using them and broke them by repeatedly whipping me in the face with them, then followed it up by punching me a few times in the face. The last instance was about 4 to 5 months ago. I moved out and she regularly contacts me demanding money. I really hope you aren't giving her any money, my friend. We weren't allowed to have food upstairs, but I had food wrappers in my trash can, so they searched my whole room, ripping clothes off hangers, throwing stuff out of drawers, etc. And for 3 months, I wasn't allowed in my room for anything, unless accompanied by one of them. I had to sleep on the couch. I don't understand how parents can take stuff to such an extreme and still think that they're doing right by their child. I have a literal book worth of stories of the abuse I survived through, but one time Dr. Phil's show told my mother that having a bed was a luxury for kids, so she immediately took mine away. I slept on a cold wood floor until I escaped that hellhole and cut off all contact. My dorm in college was the first real bed I'd slept in for 10 years. I didn't own a bed when I moved into my first apartment after college, so I was back on the wood floor. I'd moved in with the clothes on my back, my cat and her stuff, and my laptop, which I used to make money by transcribing at night, while I worked for $7 an hour, 12 hours a week at a deli. It was the only place that would hire me since I didn't have access to my own car. I cried myself to sleep every night on that wood floor. It was a reminder of how much I'd failed, leaving myself back in that position. My roommate must have heard me crying one night and figured it was back pain, because they lent me an air mattress to sleep on. It was like I'd moved into a 4-star hotel. Eventually, I saved up a spare $50 and bought a bed off Craigslist. Sketchy, but I hadn't owned my own bed in 16 years before that. I still have the bed and refuse to part with it because I don't want to end up on the floor again. I have many chronic back problems that I don't think will ever be fixed due to being forced to sleep on the floor starting at age 7. I take pain meds when I can and do yoga, but it doesn't help. Sometimes when I can't sleep in my normal bed, I find myself defaulting to the floor. When I wake up, I cry because I'm worried I'll always be like this. Parents have no idea how much they can mess up their kids. Ah yes, Dr. Phil. Responsible for a good amount of parental abuse, I'm pretty sure. This one time, I didn't want to finish drinking my milk, so my dad threw the cup across the room, shattering it and getting milk everywhere, while he proceeded to flip my chair over while I was still in it. He then crouched over my body saying, "You want to mess with me?" a bunch, and stormed out telling me to clean up the mess. And just lots more stuff like that. I once said whatever to my dad at a Bubba Gump's restaurant on vacation in Hawaii. He proceeded to scream at me and yelled at me to get out of the restaurant. I just sat there, mortified, and he left instead. I got grounded from an end-of-the-year party when I was 11 for getting a B on a paper. even though I still got all A's. I was devastated. It was thrown by my best friend, and I was never allowed to do anything, and I'd been looking forward to it all year. I had the perfect dress to wear because my aunt's mother had taken me shopping and bought this cool dress that made me feel like Molly Ringwald. I had never been allowed to wear it before, and it had been in my closet since September. I was seriously having a Cinderella moment, although I honestly related more to Jane Eyre because I was adopted and a bookworm. The day of the party comes around and I'm bawling. I'm a good kid. I try to be perfect every waking moment. Now I'm grounded from my best friend's party. The mom of my best friend knows how tough it is at home. I'm screamed at, belittled, hit all the time. This party was a beacon. My friend's mom barges into my house, tells me to get ready and get my stuff together because I'll be spending the night. My mom protests. How about I call CPS about the 50 cats in your house? I end up going to the party and she teaches me to be a badass. I had all the usual punishments. No video games for a week, no TV for X nights, no pocket money this week, groundings, you name it, I probably had it at one point or another. One particular punishment tops the rest though for creativity and cruelty. One day I was at a friend's place with my parents and discovered that if we opened his bedroom window all the way, we could squeeze out of it and climb onto his roof. His bedroom was on the second floor of their house, and they lived on top of a hill. So if we had fallen, we would have fallen probably 7 to 8 meters and then tumbled another 20 to 30 to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, both sets of parents walk outside at one point and hear us talking from the roof. They flip their lids and call us back inside. We scramble back into his bedroom and are sitting there terrified when our parents storm in. We get called down into the kitchen and are told to sit down at the kitchen table and await our punishment. My friend's dad opens up the pantry and starts pulling things out to make a sandwich. Then it hits us like a ton of bricks. Our punishment is to eat a sandwich made of the most ill-complimenting, grotesque food combinations that he had at his disposal. The final product ended up being an unholy blend of Vegemite, oysters, anchovies, cheese, creamed corn, raw beef mince, and hot English mustard. I actually don't recall what it tasted like, other than being awful. Looking back on it as an adult, I reckon it was just as much for their entertainment than our punishment. But damn if it wasn't creative. For me, it was always the wooden spoon. I got the wooden spoon until I was probably 15. Then, when my mom broke it over my backside because I wouldn't stop laughing, she moved to the metal one. Standing in the corner was another big one. My youngest sister got smart though and would get the corner where she could see the TV. So that was exchanged for flat walls on your knees, Malcolm in the Middle style. Another weird one I got was when my sister and I wouldn't stop fighting, my mom made us sit next to each other holding hands and not speaking for hours on end. I couldn't drink water from my bathroom. My bathroom genuinely had colder water, and the best water in the house. My mom got suspicious when I'd leave to my bathroom for a few seconds every few minutes. I don't know what she possibly thought I was doing with it, but no more bathroom water, and I had to drink lukewarm peasant water like the rest of my family. This one's pretty tame, but honestly just doesn't make sense. Who cares if that's the water they want to drink? I also agree bathroom water, for whatever reason, tends to be better than kitchen water. I grew up the firstborn son of an officer in the Air Force in the Bible Belt. I was an extremely inquisitive child and mentioned anything weird I found that didn't make sense in the Bible, resulting in a beating either with a belt or a wooden spoon with my pants down. I wasn't allowed to play Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or anything, as it was all satanic. So, of course now I play a boatload of Japanese card games and escapist video games, listen to obnoxious screaming noises, and have a healthy interest in European occultism. Go me, I guess.
Men, what's the most creepy thing a woman has ever done to you? Enraged in the middle of the argument, she took my fish out of the aquarium and threatened to step on it. I saved the little guy. It was a beta, if you want to know. Takes anger out on small creatures. That right there, my friend, is a red flag. Cut off all of her pubic hair, put them in between layers of scotch tape, crammed them in an envelope with a pair of her used panties, and put the envelope under my windshield wiper. There was a note that read something like, "I know we can't be together, but now you'll always remember me." She was right. It's already been stated what she was trying to accomplish. I just can't fathom as to why she came up with that. Probably not as exciting as most here, but still super frickin' weird. I was staying at my friend's house, sleeping in his guest room. Friend is at work, his girlfriend is at home. One thing about this room is that it has a very heavy door that has to be held open by something super heavy or else it slams shut. Well, I sleep with the door closed. I wake up in the morning, and as I do every morning, I laid there for a bit longer before actually getting out of bed. Well, this time, all of a sudden, I see the door open, the light is still off, but the hallway light being on means I can see if someone's standing in the doorway. I have my eyes kind of opened, and I can see that she's just standing there in the doorway, staring at me. I didn't move. I wanted to see what the hell would happen because this was thoroughly freaking me out. She just stood there for at least 10 minutes, didn't look away, didn't walk around the room. I was laying at a weird angle where I could see her perfectly. She could see me, but she couldn't see that my eyes were half open. I thought she may have been in there to grab something because there's a bunch of stuff in the closet, clothes and such. Nope. 10 minutes I waited for her to do something or to walk out. Finally, I flinched and feigned waking up, and I heard her run out and slam the door. I got up, went to the kitchen, and she was as bubbly as could be, acting like nothing happened, acting like she didn't just spend 10 minutes watching me sleep. I kind of think if you were just laying there watching her, watching you for like 10 minutes, if that was even as long as it happened for, I think you were hoping for something to happen. I would have just said, hey, why are you staring at me? Can I help you? Do you want something? Dated this girl who I later found out to be literally a compulsive liar and also into witchcraft. After not being able to deal with her insanity anymore, I broke things off. She would wait outside my door for God knows how long until I came home and say she left something at my house. This happened a lot. One day, I was going to add a new email account to my phone and realized that her email account was still saved on my phone. I shouldn't have checked it, but she was actively stalking me and I needed to know what I was up against. There were tons of emails to some witchcraft lady she found online somehow. All about me. She was paying this internet witch like hundreds of dollars an hour for what I would consider witch consulting. It was all about me. How to cast spells to get me back, how to enchant me, how to curse my new GF, all kinds of crazy crap. She was using this lady as like a weird therapist almost, asking her a bunch of relationship questions too. This went on for months. The witch lady was getting a little annoyed at her, I could feel, although she couldn't complain that much because she was draining her for literally thousands of dollars. She told the witch that at some point I told her that she needs to seek professional help. The witch actually told her that might not be a bad idea. She ended up moving into the house of a mutual friend, this girl from school that was literally one building away from mine. My friend told me that she was always burning weird spices and candles. It was at the direction of the witch, actually. It was creepy as hell, and eventually she cut my brakes. I'm reminded of this time I saw that some witches were trying to spiritually take down Allah or something and needed like a lot of witch power to be able to defeat him. Because, you know, Allah is just so spiritually powerful, you need as many witches as you can get. But also, yeah, she pretty cray-cray. I fell asleep sitting next to one of my friends on the way home from a school trip in 12th grade. I woke up to her using my hand to play with herself. As I began to regain consciousness, she threw my hand at me and made a huge scene about it. I never talked to her about it. It bothers me to this day. Definitely top 3. Say what? That's gotta be considered assault on some degree. What the figgity uck? Girl I had seen for 2 dates had her best friend SMS me anonymously claiming we went in a bar the night before and offering to come over to my place. I rarely went to bars as I worked night shift at the time, so I knew I hadn't met anyone at a bar. Eventually, after probing and pushing, I got the girl to confess. She said she was just testing to make sure I was trustworthy. Didn't see her again. I understand the need, the want, the desire for a trustworthy man in your life, but goddamn, there are better ways to go about it than that. Smarter ways, even. Met a girl at a bar and we ended up back at her place. We fooled around and fell asleep. She seemed normal all night and I saw no red flags at all. I definitely would have dated her again, until she went crazy. I woke up at around 5 a.m. and started getting dressed to leave. I had to get home and get ready for work. She woke up while I was dressing and totally freaked out. She was screaming angrily, "You can't leave!" I explained I needed to go to work and that I'd call her later. She was having none of that. Then she attacked. I literally had to physically fight my way out of her apartment with a few scratches on my arm for souvenirs. I have no idea what her deal was, and I never went back to the bar I met her in. What's the problem, girl? He said he'd call you back. I mean, I guess there's a chance that he's lying, but, you know, what the hell? This happened to a buddy of mine, except she threatened to call the police and say that he raped her if he didn't stay. He nervously left the apartment. She called the cops and pressed charges. He lost his job, his sanity, everything. She eventually admitted nothing happened, yet his life was already crumbled into pieces and his reputation ruined. She never suffered any consequences. Be careful out there. It's sad but true, yeah. Some women will do you like that. A girl broke into my house 3 times in a week while I was rehearsing Celeste. Each time, she left money to repair the window, a large bag of Twizzlers, and 2 cans of tuna for my cat. That was it. We had never been romantically or physically involved. We barely even knew each other. This oddly sounds to me like the modern version of the humble beginnings of a festive or cultural celebration of some sort. Once a year, around the globe, women break into men's apartments and leave Twizzlers and cat food, whether they have a cat or not. That'd be crazy. Really drunk chick asked me to dance and proceeded to keep trying to pull my willy out, like forcefully. When I'd finally resisted enough, she called me a nerd and stormed off. You're not a nerd, buddy. You're a survivor. I was probably 9. It was after church service, and there's this new lady there who took a liking to me. She was the new wife of the minister. We were outside waiting for the grown-ups to come out. I think they were having a meeting inside. And this new lady took me to a bench nearby. We sat, asked me lots of questions. Then she put my head on her lap, stroked my hair while humming a lullaby like I'm a baby. It felt really uncomfortable, and I really wanted to escape. But I was a shy little boy and didn't want to offend her or something. So my sister from afar snickering at us. It went on like this for 30 minutes, but felt like hours. I was dying with cringe inside. If I were that child's sister, there'd be a point if it really went on for 30 minutes, which I highly doubt this woman sat there on a bench and stroked this random child's head for 30 minutes unless she really is a little bit unstable. But there'd be a point where you're kinda concerned, right? Weird. I had a similar experience when I was younger that your story made me rethink. I lived in a neighborhood with middle-class housing. I had a friend whose parents were divorced, so his mother lived right down the street from me, and when he wasn't with his father in Hawaii, he was with her. So I was young, like 10 or 11 years old. My friend was with his father at the time, so he was not there. I was walking home, and when I was walking past his house, his mother was outside sitting in front of her garage smoking a cigarette. It was odd since we never really spoke other than standard pleasantries. I was respectful, as you should be. She made me sit on her lap while she talked, and she, for whatever reason, kissed my cheek multiple times with her arm around me. I know, sounds hentai AF, but I can assure you this happened. I can't for the life of me remember what she was saying since I was a kid that was only focused on getting home. She had red lipstick on, which was now on my skin, of course. Moving along, after a while, she let me go and I walked home where my mom prepared me a bath. She asked me about the lipstick and I told her what happened. She didn't react much, but thinking in hindsight, she may have freaked out. Nothing happened after that, and I was a very optimistic child who didn't think much of it. I think that she was lonely without her son. She lived alone and I don't recall her having visitors. Just thinking as a parent in 2020, having your 10-year-old son come home with lipstick on his cheek would be a huge yikes. Yeah, that one's just a tad bit sketchy in my opinion. Met a girl at a party. We flirted, then we ended up in my bedroom. This was in my apartment. Heavy makeout. I suggest having intercourse. She declines. Heavier making out, basically including anything that's not intercourse. I suggest having intercourse again. She declines. Fair enough. We stopped the making out and planned to see each other again. The day we were supposed to meet, she stood me up. I had cooked and it was already time to meet. She told me that she doesn't want to see me again because I wasn't pushy enough. She liked men who are less soft and gentle. She basically told me that when she said no, I shouldn't have listened. Good riddance, I say. I don't care if a woman means yes when she says no. I take out a dictionary and I show her the meaning of no because that's what she said. Plus, in this day and age, how can you not be absolutely paranoid all the time that people are like recording conversations to like use in future courts of law or something? Keep in mind I'm only a junior in high school. I was about in 7th or 8th grade and I was at a New Year's party at my grandparents' house with all of their friends. You can tell I'm a party animal spending my New Year's with 60 and 70-year-olds, and one of their friends who I'd known for a while continued touching me and grabbing me in my waist and thigh region. She would sneak it in like under the table or walking past each other or whatever. I totally understand the stereotypical grandma cheek pinch or whatever, but this was something else. After squeezing my butt with both hands, I had enough and said something to her. The rest of the night was super awkward, but the worst part was my grandma was defending her and downplaying the whole situation. It wasn't until I told my mom the next day she lost her temper on my grandma that she finally admitted she was wrong, and I haven't seen her since. For clarification, the person they haven't seen since is the groper. Well, here goes. I'm in high school and we're having PE. A girl that I hardly know asks me, "Hey, you want to see my butt?" And I say, no. She then proceeds to pull her whole pants down right in front of 30-odd students and the PE teacher. Everyone was just like, WTF, and she just pulls him back up and walks away like nothing happened. Someone I worked with sniffed the inside of my jacket that I forgot to bring with me. Later, she gave me a date with her as a wedding gift, only to be used before the wedding, and asked me if I was truly happy on my wedding day. Some people really do choose to strike at the worst or weirdest times, don't they? Older woman was cutting my hair. She was 60, I was about 24. She rambled on about how she loves bearded men and I might be old, but I can still look at the menu. She then told me about how she likes to go to clubs with her son in his 40s because she's his wingman and likes younger men. While this was happening, she kept running her hands down the front of my shirt. I later brought it up to the other employees there, who just laughed it off and said, "Oh yeah, that's just her. Apparently sexual assault is just part of her personality." The compliments didn't bother me too much until she started getting handsy. I'm fine with a bit of light flirting, but I'll admit if I had to sit through an entire haircut with this woman, I'd probably be like, you know what, I'm gonna go to a different chair. Woman I was engaged to was doing all the prep for the wedding. This was in her country and I didn't understand the language all that well, so I was a bit limited on how much I could help her out, other than helping to cut the invite cards out, etc. She was a very hot-tempered person as she was, but as much as I asked her what tasks I could help out with, she just refused to involve me in anything at all, and then complained that I wasn't helping enough. She argued and argued with me about how I didn't care despite my efforts to be involved in all the prep. It was all very manipulative. Eventually, she actually pulled a knife out at me. I slapped it off her wrist and she stormed off. When she left for work the next day, I packed my bags, took a taxi to the airport, and noped out of there. I'm picturing this woman coming back from work and being like, "Why has my fiancé left me? It couldn't possibly be because I pulled a knife on him." Wearing my sports jacket when I went to grab a fast food order, some woman I've never seen before shouted hi and waved at me like we were best friends, gave an awkward, confused wave back and left with my food. A couple hours later, I get a friend request on Facebook from someone I recognized as her. Best guess is she saw my jacket and stalked the sports roster to find my name and added me from that. Got blocked real quick. That or on a first date, she asked, "If you were going to kill me, how would you do it? I know how I would kill you." Then proceeded to tell me her plan on how she would kill me and get away with it. I don't know, sounds kinda hot if you ask me.
Oh yeah, baby, why don't you tell me again how you're gonna murder me in my sleep and get away with it?
Asked me if I had feelings for her the day before her wedding, which I was in. Then after being married, insisted that we talk, and was trying to sit on my lap at a party when we were both drunk, and I told her it could wait until the morning. She revealed in the morning that she had cut herself after I wouldn't talk with her. I told her we couldn't be friends, and she texted me every day for 6 months without me responding until I learned how to block her number. A mutual friend told me she asked for my number from him this last summer. I haven't spoken to her for 10 years, so there's that. This woman is either down bad or she wants problems all the time. Back when I was working overnights at a national pharmacy chain, there was an older lady in her 50s that would pick up prescriptions and try to hit on me a few times. The most direct and creepiest thing she said to me was, "I don't know why women who go for younger men are called cougars. I like to be called a python because I like to ensnare young men. Do you like pythons?" Luckily, I was saved by a customer that promptly needed something picked up, and I ignored her until she left. I don't know why this just reminded me of an interaction I had at a bar where this older woman approached me, started talking to me, went, "Oh, drinking on a school night, are we, young man?" And I looked her dead in the eye and went, "Madam, I am 25 years old. I haven't been to school in like 7 years." When I was 17 eating a slice of pizza in a pizzeria in New York, I was sitting facing the glass looking out to the street. Time was around 7 p.m. It was getting dark. I'll never forget this 50-something-year-old lady was walking on the sidewalk, saw me eating, slowed down, stared straight at me with the most seductive grin and then winked. Then continued on walking. Until that point in my life, I had never felt so many emotions at once. I was turned on, weirded out, intrigued, scared. This was a day I will never forget. She had black hair and was pretty hot. This one's rather nice, no invasion of someone's personal space or anything like that, just a little smile and a wink. I had a girlfriend once that was really possessive, to the point of stalker behavior. We had been dating for maybe 3 months and she didn't have a life. She never did anything and always wanted to spend time with me, and I was a fairly busy person. It gets to the point where she doesn't believe that I could have so much going on in my life that I can't video call her for at least an hour at the start and end of every single day. If I wasn't replying to her messages within 5 minutes, she'd send about 7 more, then call me a few times. Then it got to the point that she looked at all my social profiles to see when I was last online to see whether I should have seen her texts or not. Also, within 2 weeks, she had planned our wedding and named our 4 children Max, Harrison, Lily, and Sophia. Went downtown to CVS to get my dad's medication at like 9 at night. While waiting for the cashier to come back, 2 old women in line made conversation with me. Unprompted, they started feeling on my shoulders and arms. Pulled the "I have a girlfriend" lie while trying to be nice so no trouble would happen. Inside, I was extremely creeped out. As if she had a sixth sense, the cashier reappeared out of nowhere so I could pay and leave, giving the 2 women a glare in the meantime. They gave my biceps a squeeze before leaving me alone. Felt so dirty. I took a shower after I got home. Next time I saw that cashier, I thanked her. "No problem," she said. Gave her a tip. For those asking, no, nothing progressed. The cashier had an engagement ring on her finger. Were some people hoping for a surprise love story? Maybe not the worst, but here's something. I was in a really low mental state due to some past trauma and recent health issues when we started dating, which I think was part of the appeal for her. Since looking back, the whole thing was very predatory. Iffy age gap, 24M and 32F. She started talking shared finances just a month or so into the dating. It's pretty obvious what she was about in hindsight. Anyway, she encouraged me to start keeping a journal to help with my mental recovery. What a twist. For the journal, she would ask questions and I would write answers to them, which she would read. Most of it was extremely personal. A good amount also sensitive, sexual information. I too am boggled that I went along with this. She was also doing classic abuser things, trying to cut me off from my best friends and all. Fortunately, it only took a few months for me to start seeing clearly, though I wasn't quite committed to breaking up. She must have sensed some resistance though. One day she asked for my journal, set it aside, then proceeded to start the breakup talk. I agreed that it wasn't working out for me either, and overall it was very amicable until I asked for my journal back, literally instant screaming that it belonged to her. I just stayed seated and kept repeating that she hadn't written a thing in it and I was the one who originally purchased it. She tossed it at me after a bit and I bounced out of there like a bat out of hell. She did send an apology about it over social media private messaging some years later, but it was also while letting me know that she would be attending kink meetups in my city though, so Yeah, I gotta agree that entire relationship sounded sus as all get out.
Was at work late upgrading PCs to Windows 10. I'm happily married and had only recently gotten married at the time. While I was in the contact center upgrading multiple PCs, I was kind of cornered by a young woman who wound up saying, "If you ever need a release from your wife, I'm here and more than happy to, mess around or something. I think you're super attractive." And it kept going for a few minutes. I mentioned that I'm happily married with no intentions of cheating, and she kind of pushed for a while longer, lingered while I kept working, and then eventually left. It was probably the most awkward 20 minutes I have ever sat through at work.
Hey, some women can't take no for an answer, and some of those women have never learned that patience is a virtue. But hey, good on you for not cheating on your wife. While I was at a rave, I had this girl walk up to me like the living dead while I was in a conversation with a bunch of people. This jaw swinger stops dead in front of me and says, "What's that?" and proceeds to grab me by the banger and beans with all the strength a turned-up 20-year-old can muster. I told her to get her frickin' hands off my junk and she scuttled away like Gollum being separated from his precious. About 10 minutes later, a friend taps me on the shoulder, points behind me, looking concerned, and tells me to look. There are 3 cops with a canine and a crying, crazy harlot claiming I tried to grape her. They were ready to frickin' destroy me without so much as a hint of proof. If I wasn't with so many people all night, most of which were young ladies there to back my story up, well, I'm pretty sure that nutbag could have ruined my life very easily. So, suddenly and inappropriately grabs a man by his banger and beans and then proceeds to accuse him of grape? What a cow. Played an MMO for a while where you could join 5 guilds. This lady was in 3 of them, was always nice but very flirty with me. Our guilds used TeamSpeak a lot and the 2 of us got to talking. Turns out though, we lived a few hundred miles and an international border away. We shared a crap ton of interests. She claimed to be in her 20s. I was over 30 at the time. We became friends, though she made it very clear to everyone that she wanted more. In fact, she referred to me as her nickname I went by in that game, and I found out that she was going to be traveling to an area near me right around my birthday. So I offered to meet her in a public setting. That's when she dropped it on me. She wasn't really in her 20s, she was turning 16. Technically over the age of consent, but yeah, still a kid. Even if there weren't legal issues, I simply was not interested in dating anyone that young. I have a 5-year rule. I only date people that are within 5 years of me. So I had a long talk with her. I explained to her that I was damn near twice her age, and while her interest in me was flattering, I wasn't interested. She was devastated, crying, telling me I was making a mistake because she would be the best girlfriend/future wife possible, that age was just a number. Finally, I told her that in 2 years when she turned 18 and brought proof of that, I would consider going on a single date with her if she was really that serious, and that if all went well, I would consider making an exception to my 5-year rule. But under absolutely no circumstances would I ever date or even meet with someone that was under 18. She wasn't happy, but eventually accepted that was the best she would get, and we stayed in touch even after I left the game. Fast forward almost but not quite 2 years, she has finally found a boyfriend. She hits me up on TeamSpeak. She wants me to travel up there to meet them because in her words, she wants me to know exactly what the hell I missed out on by unfairly and unreasonably turning her down. Age is just a number and shouldn't have gotten in the way. She has since become more normal, but yeah, those 2 incidents really creeped me out. No, I have never dated her. I had dated other women I had met in games before then, never have since. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, potential neckbeard and World of Warcraft player. I don't know if you can join 5 guilds in World of Warcraft. If anyone can guess what the game he was playing was, I'd love to know.
What's an experience you and a friend shared where you both silently agreed to never speak of it again? In grade school, a friend tried to make his pee hole bigger with an Allen key. I told him he shouldn't try, but he did anyway. There was a lot of blood, and it was pretty messed up. He just wrapped his bits in toilet paper, and nothing was said of the incident ever again. What the? Why would you even do that? I slept with a female friend of mine at her brother's birthday party. I ended up finishing all over a huge beanbag. After we got cleaned up and everything, we hung out. Her brother and his 11-year-old friends come running in and they start jumping on the beanbag that we forgot to clean. After jumping around for a bit, a lot of them started noticing wet spots on each other. We told them we spilled water and have not had a conversation about it to this day. I, female, semi-drunkenly hooked up with one of my guy friends, who I'd known for a long time. He has some really tiny equipment, maybe 2 to 3 inches erect. He was really nervous about it, but I didn't really mind since he was quite good at other stuff. The next morning, we were cuddling in bed and he begged me not to tell any of our friends about our hookup or his size. We're still good friends and his secret will always be safe with me. I went streaking with my male friend while very drunk. His big-boobed girlfriend decided to join in the nudity. I said she had some nice ones once they're revealed. My friend decides he doesn't like me ogling her jumblies and decides to fight me. Let the drunken nude wrestling begin. Back in middle school, a friend and I, both girls, used to sit on the couch in my basement and use one of those giant yoga balls to press into each other's crotches to get off. It felt great, and we would softly talk dirty to each other the whole time. This happened 2 or 3 times she came over. Haven't talked about it since. When I was nearing the end of my freshman year of college, a few friends of mine dropped acid one Sunday afternoon. The acid was apparently very strong, and all but one of them went off trip-a-dip-a-doodling on their merry way. The one I speak of got stuck in his own head and was found wandering through the halls, buck naked with a blank expression on his face. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, this was during family visit weekend. Anyways, after a couple of friends and I grab a towel and corral my fried friend into a dorm room, he proceeds to sit on a bed and stare out the window, still completely naked. Being the responsible person I am, I realize that he's so out of touch with reality to the point that he may accidentally hurt himself if left alone. So I tell the gathering crowd that I'll stay with him and they can go enjoy the beautiful Sunday Santa Cruz afternoon. I then grabbed the nearest smoking device and got incredibly stoned while I had to stare 4 hours at my naked friend on LSD while he worked his way out of his psychedelic pickle. Several people casually walked into the room, stared at my friend, stared at me, laughed, and then turned around and left during this time. A few hours into my marathon pot-laden babysitting venture, he looked over at me, stood up to put his pants on, and said, "That was really weird. We haven't mentioned it since." I walked in on my roommate and good friend taking care of himself. I saw everything. He'll occasionally try to jokingly bring it up when we're drunk or something, but I shut him down. Always. I'd rather just pretend it never happened. I, male, was probably 7 years old and at my male best friend's house playing Mario Kart, and we caught his mom giving my dad a BJ. Proceeded to act it out and get caught by them. They were peeved, but agreed to say nothing on the agreement we said nothing to our other parents. Didn't really help. Both marriages were crap. I'm sorry, what do you mean you proceeded to act it out? Never mind, I don't want to know. I, a straight male, had been drinking heavily with some friends all day and had recently returned from a nighttime skinny dip. I, being too drunk to get dressed, was just in a towel. We were all around the fire when I start to feel a bit sick. I end up accidentally dropping my towel and half crawling over to one of the girls, throwing up on her while halfway across. Apparently, every time I would heave, I would thrust a bit, so my bits were slapping her in the face. I woke up naked, spooning another friend's boyfriend in their tent with no recollection of the night's events. This would count, except they all seemed to never shut up about it. I mean, if I woke up in that situation, I definitely have some questions. So yes, please talk to me about it. What the heck happened? A buddy of mine was driving with me as a passenger. We went down the road near his house along the lake when he says, "Check her out. A woman in a bikini is going down for a swim. What a butt." He slowed down so I could roll down the window and do a catcall. We were stupid 17-year-olds. I was leaning out the window yelling, "Woo, baby, nice butt." She turned around and it was his mom. Nothing too crazy, but my best friend has never kissed a guy and she was afraid she would mess it up, so she begged me to teach her first. I'm a girl, by the way. I agreed, and I knew she was nervous, so we had a few glasses of wine first and then we tried to practice. I lean in to kiss her and she giggles, which makes me laugh. After several unsuccessful tries, we actually managed lip contact for about half a minute. I was really proud of her because I knew she was nervous. She suddenly bursts into tears and gets snot all over me, and cries about being a bad friend asking me to do this. I probably shouldn't have given her so much to drink in hindsight. We never speak of it only because we know we'll just laugh too much and she's mortified. On a college trip abroad, my best friend and I head up to our hotel room. We get asked by one of our tutors to get our other tutor from his room. We knock on the door and realize it's ajar. We sheepishly head inside quietly and spot a big bag of white powder on the bed with lines on the sideboard. Glance at each other, shake our heads, walk out and get pizza. I was at my friend's house at around the age of 13. We're making tea and I open the cupboard for a mug. Inside is a Tupperware box with a large square tinfoil packet, around the size of a 5-kilo bag of sugar, and a bunch of little bags of brown powder. I take the cups out and close the cupboard and don't say a word. 10 years on and we've still never discussed it, and I don't think I've talked about it with anyone else either. Interestingly, his dad's a great guy and has been a very hands-on father despite divorcing my friend's mom. My best friend's husband hit on me a month before the wedding. We had all been drinking that night. He was wasted, and I was slightly tipsy but fully aware. I told him off and told him if I ever found out he tried that with another girl, I'd rip his appendage off. I was maid of honor at the wedding and I never told her. I thought about it, but they had already bought a house together. The wedding was set and she was just so happy. I put it out of my mind and pretended it never happened, and I'm glad I did. They were married for 5 years before she got brain cancer and died, leaving behind a daughter. He was the most doting husband during the 7 months she wasted away and is a truly amazing father. He's remarried now and the most loyal man I've ever met. If I had taken his one idiot move as the basis for his life, I could quite possibly have ruined a lot for him and her. I was unsure if I was doing the right thing at the time, but now I know it was definitely the best thing to do. Wow, that one really took a turn I was not expecting. Goes to show you though, sometimes good people just make mistakes. I had a drunken 5-way with my roommate, his girlfriend, and another couple. 3 guys, 2 girls. We all ended up blacking out and only had vague memories of strip poker and awkwardness in the morning. Until we found the video. We all decided to delete the video and never talk about it ever again. The next month was very quiet. In 7th grade, my best friend and I were playing basketball at the park. I had to poo so bad, but the closest toilet was across the street. So I stopped and pulled my shorts away from my body and let the poop fall without touching my shorts. We walked away casually and no one saw. Ew, come on, man. Just hold it till you get there. A few years ago, I was at a party and had gone with a longtime female friend. All was well at first, but as the night went on, we both had a bit too much to drink. Her boyfriend of over 2 years had suddenly dumped her by text, and I had just found out my girlfriend had cheated on me. I say this because we were both dancing and both buzzed and emotionally unstable. As a joke, she grinds into me, laughing as she does it, but I start getting aroused and grind back. I suddenly realize what I'm doing and back off. But her face is red and she's visibly aroused. She pulls me into the bathroom and we proceed to get to business. Not super hot, lustful animal stuff, but we both enjoyed it and make out for a few minutes, then we both duck out, using the excuse I had to hold her hair as she puked. The hostess, a mutual friend, offered us to stay the night, which we took her up on. She passed out and I was having a heart attack. We were buzzed. What if she freaks out? Did I just ruin a 7-year-long close friendship just to feel good and make our exes angry? A million things ran through my mind, and I eventually nodded off. I woke up an hour later with her sprawled on me, which is fine. We've shared a bed more than a few times. She wakes up and blinks, looks at me and goes, "What the hell? Buy me dinner first next time, dork." She ends it with a laugh, but my face must have been ghost white. She hugs me and says, "Two consenting adults had fun. Plus, hey, better someone I know and trust rather than some weird jerk who might have tried something weird. We're still friends, okay? If you need to be alone, I understand." I hug her back and ask her if she's up for some IHOP. All is well and we're still best of friends and hang out regularly. That was about 2 years ago, and we both haven't said a word about it. We traded drunken, confusing oral at the tender age of 16. He initiated it, but I didn't need much persuading. Felt great at the time, but 10 minutes later started a spiral of self-doubt and confusion that lasted about a year. Worked it out in the end. He went on to marry a woman. I'm in a civil partnership with a man. We never mentioned it after that night, and given I moved away a few years later, plus, his lady wife, it's unlikely to ever be spoken of again, except here, now. When I was about 4 years old or so, I had a best friend whose name shall not be disclosed. We'll call him Tom. Tom and I lived in the same neighborhood, so we had plenty of opportunities to stay over at each other's houses while our mothers jibber-jabbed in the next room. When we were at my house, we played in the basement, which was outfitted as a playroom, with trains and Legos and all sorts of fun things, like markers. So he and I are downstairs in the playroom and he decides that he's done with the trains, so he picks up an orange marker. We didn't have any paper, so he finds this felt dartboard and colors on the white cardboard backing. I want to get along with him, so I do the same, choosing a green marker. Well, he soon gets bored with this as well, but he thinks the colors would look cooler if the lights were out. So he waddles up to the light switch, climbs on top of the toy chest, and turns off the lights. The colors do indeed look cooler. Of course, coloring is only so much fun when one is full of chocolate milk. So we both get up and walk over to where we tossed our socks earlier. I don't remember why we took off our socks, but it must have been something they said because we immediately peed all over them. Our socks were soon thoroughly soaked with our urine. This gave Tom an idea. He looked down at his mini member and thought to himself, "Know what would look really cool if it were orange?" At least, I assume that's what he was thinking, because he then started coloring his bits orange. Maybe he just wanted a better tan. And of course, Tom is absolutely right. It does look cooler. But you know what's cooler than orange? Green. Green is much cooler than orange. So I proceed to color my own willy green. Cue our Catholic mothers. Tom's mother is absolutely horrified. At least, that's what my own mother tells me. To be honest, I don't remember much after coloring the felt dartboard. My own mother, thankfully, I guess, took a much more humorous approach. She thought it was hysterical. Anyway, they took us upstairs to the bathroom and made us wash our little dongs in the bathtub, while my mother washed and dried our socks. After that, Tom and his mom went home. I've never heard anything about that incident from anybody aside from my mother, and vague memories are my only assurance that the story is true. In any case, neither Tom nor I have ever spoken of it, nor will I ever, except to my fiancé, because if I don't, my mother will. Come on, Ma, be cool around the fiancé. When I was 15, my friend Gerald was staying over for the weekend. It was the typical Friday night. We were up playing video games on my N64, hanging out, and watching random horror movies at a low volume with the dialogue replaced with our own snarky narration while he browsed the net on my computer. This would be rude ordinarily, but he didn't have a computer or the internet at his home, and it was an opportunity for him to get some exposure to both. We were playing Gauntlet Legends when he paused the game and looked at me. "Dude, your arm's bleeding." "Oh, I must have gotten myself on a tree while I was dirt biking. It's nothing. I'm fine. Now let's kill some dwarves." We started up again, but I could see him looking at my arm every few minutes out of the corner of my eye. He paused the game again and dropped the controller between his knees. "So if you don't tell me what's actually wrong, I'm waking up your mom." "I'm fine." "Dude, cut it out. When you got up to grab a drink, your sleeve pulled up and I saw him." I sat there for a bit, closed my eyes and sighed. He knew, so there was no point in hiding it or keeping up the charade. He lifted my sleeve as I sat there and hung my head quietly, then backed away in hushed silence. When I looked up to make eye contact, his eyes were rimmed with tears. "Why would you do that to yourself, man? Those aren't clean lines. You carved them with something. It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it for me." So I told him the truth. I was deeply depressed. My family was disintegrating, and it was the only way to get that kind of bottled emotional pain out of my system. I was halfway through explaining myself when he wrapped his arms around me and hugged the breath out of me. "I love you, original poster. Not in a gay way. You're my best friend and you're like a brother to me. I'm there for you, man. Just don't do this again, alright? I won't tell anyone, but you'd better promise me that you'll call me the next time it gets that bad." The rest of the night was understandably strained. No matter how we tried to forget it all, the elephant was still in the room. We never spoke about it again. He did his best to pretend nothing had happened the next day and would flat out not acknowledge my wounds. Okay, to anyone that's going through anything like this, there's always someone that wants to hear from you. Even if you don't feel like you have a close friend, there are numbers that you can call and people that you can talk to. Please, take care of yourself and love yourself. Kindly, a random stranger on the internet. 6th grade, outdoor school. Him and I ate a lot of pudding. A load of pudding. That night, we both book it to the bathroom, almost pooping our pants. We get to the toilets and just let it rip, and holy crap did we crap. We're sitting in adjacent stalls and we're just laughing our butts off at the sound of each other's poop. Think like fire hoses. Good stuff. We decided to never speak about that again, but really it's not that bad. Pretty funny. Me and my friend were both maybe 8 or 9, and we were watching adult content in his basement. He says, "This might seem weird, but when I watch this or see a hot girl, my thing gets real hard and bigger." I say, having knowledge of this for some reason, "It gets hard so it will fit into the girl's stuff. A soft one would probably just mush to the side." I pretty much gave my friend the talk because his dad never did, or never got the chance, because he died when we were 12. In high school, a friend had a party at his place. I had pre-gamed and drank a bit too much too fast and spent a majority of the party laying on the couch with my head spinning. As the party died down a bit, a good female friend, I'm male, came over and started rubbing my head and shoulders and asking if I felt okay. The party host announced he was going downstairs with his girlfriend and not to come down there unless you wanted to join. I looked up at my friend and asked if she wanted to go downstairs on a silly whim. She agreed, which caught me completely by surprise. I had no idea how much she had to drink either, but alas, we went down to the basement as well. I don't even know what I was expecting. When we got there, my friend's bedroom door was closed and locked, and he promptly told us to go away. Her and I went over to his couch and sat down together. I don't even know how it started. We just started making out. Nothing serious, just some hand stuff. We went to the bathroom, cleaned up, and literally never spoke a word about it, ever again. So I'm part of this 3-man best friend group thing. We'll call these 2 best friends D and M. They're both like brothers to me, and we've known each other for around a decade. We're all in our early 20s. The kind of friendship where we can and do talk about anything without discomfort. We cannot be uncomfortable around each other anymore. One of our random guy talks goes in the direction of sexuality one day, and I mention the idea that I'm probably bi. There's a point that's made relating back to the fact that we have this 3-way bromance going on where we joke about being lovers and stuff. And there was a tongue-in-cheek joke rumor that I was secretly dating D in high school. So it's funny that I'm not straight. Funny, one day I'm hanging out with D and just chatting. Topic of sex stuff comes up. He asks me about my bi-ness, asks if I've ever thought about him or M in that way. Oh man, I know you're just curious, but come on, this isn't gonna end well. I go for honesty and openness and he responds in kind, because we're the kind of guys that can speak honestly without awkwardness. No need to dress things up. So we talk frankly about the theoretical idea of the two of us as a romantic couple, on the assumption that speaking about it seriously doesn't mean we're serious about it. We get stuck on this topic and somehow come to the conclusion that we wouldn't make a bad couple. Too bad he isn't into guys, right? Long story short, it ends up being a long night. And the more he thinks about it, the more he doesn't see such a problem with the idea. I knew we were tight, but this is something else. He's similarly surprised by how much the idea doesn't faze him, and within a couple hours, our tone moves from neutral comments stemming from simple curiosity to a pretty serious discussion that sounds like he might try to take it somewhere. I don't know what happened, seriously, but suddenly it's like 1 a.m. in the morning and he straight up asks me out, completely serious. As far as I know, the dude's completely straight, and I've been best friends with him for half my life. Suddenly, he's telling me he thinks he loves me, and it feels so natural to say that, and why didn't he say it sooner? And I'm sorry, man, but I don't see you in that way. Emotional intimacy is one thing, and we got that going for us. You're a cool guy, really, but I can't accept this. I just can't see you in that way at this point. I can't. It's never been brought up again. Wood movie had a happy ending until you consider what had to happen next. At the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you just know that Cameron is going to get his butt whooped by his dad. Braveheart. I mean, the movie is historically inaccurate, but it ends at the Battle of Bannockburn, where the narrator says they won their freedom, but that freedom only lasted like 5 years before war broke out again. Breakfast Club. Bender most likely went home and got beaten by his dad again after the movie ended. The Truman Show. This guy has no idea what the real world is like and he's just thrown into it. Most people have 18 years of preparation. If we're being honest here, he probably sued the crap out of them, so I'm sure Truman was living in luxury afterwards. Lawyers would be jumping to take this case. The Day After Tomorrow. It isn't hugs and giggles. Things do not go back to normal. The human race got slapped hard. Much of the upper hemisphere is covered in ice. Let's not mince words. A few billion people died. Whole nations were wiped off the map. Yes, you have survivors, but now this problem. Food. A huge section of the world's agriculture was taken away. How are you going to feed the remaining masses? This doesn't include shelter. Those lucky ones who are on the edge of the frost are going to move further down, South America and Africa. While true, the ice will melt eventually, this massive snow front will have a huge effect on global climates. Everything will be colder, sunlight being reflected off the surface rather than absorbed. The survivors will have such terrible hardships ahead. It will take a generation or more to bounce back. We're not even talking about political turmoil. Warlords, tyrants, and dictators will rise to power. Wars over limited resources. The movie ends with our gang getting picked up by what remains of the US government. The future is so uncertain. Many more will perish from harsh weather, starvation, sickness, and/or hostilities. We don't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The human race will suffer with huge blood losses to come. I think I kind of want to see this sequel now. The Day After Tomorrow. WALL-E. It would still take decades before the people were actually able to live off the earth, and their quality of life would still be awful compared to their lives in the ship. Monsters, Inc. There's a reason they made a prequel and not a sequel. Laughter being 10 times more powerful means a lot of factory monsters would have lost their jobs, even accounting for the energy crisis. Rent. Mimi has AIDS. She'll definitely be dead soon. Roger and Collins have HIV in the 80s. They'll probably be dead soon. Mark is all alone and is gonna watch his best friends die. Joanne and Maureen might get a happy ending though. Yeah, the characters in Rent get it pretty rough. The Sound of Music. The nuns were almost definitely executed by the Nazis as soon as it became apparent they helped the family escape. Almost any horror movie where one character makes it through the entire movie and is the last man standing, actually usually a female, covered in blood and surrounded by dead bodies. What happens when the police arrive? Yeah, I can't say that looks good. Whiplash. Outwardly, it seems like a happy ending. Andrew proves Fletcher wrong and showcases his abilities as a musician. However, that's exactly what Fletcher wanted, and proved that his abusive teaching style works. All Fletcher wanted was his Charlie Parker. That's why he was so angry when his former student died. He thought he was going to fill that role. When Andrew begins his solo, at first Fletcher is clearly mad and confused. But as Andrew continues, Fletcher guides him, and the movie ends with them sharing eye contact before finishing the song. With this, Andrew becomes his Charlie Parker, something Fletcher can put on a pedestal and say, I created that talent. You also have to consider what happens to Andrew after this. He goes right back into the abuse he suffered from under Fletcher, and loses all the love and enjoyment that he has for jazz music. In my opinion, I see Andrew having a similar fate with either the real Charlie Parker, a heroin addict who died of overdose at 34, or Fletcher's former student who took their own life. Zootopia. The whole plot of the movie hinges on reshaping the natural order by all living in unity. That's great. Right until you realize that herbivores are still super good at reproducing to make up for carnivores, as shown by the rabbit population sign counter going up at a ridiculous rate gag. Except nobody's eating them anymore. By the end of the movie, it's also revealed that there's herbivore extremists which want to take it further and get rid of carnivores. Overpopulation and possibly genocide is on its way. Kate and Leopold. Kate finds out that she can't vote or own property anymore now that she's living in the past. Also, she has to live with the knowledge that she porked her own grandson. The Avengers. Everyone's sitting around having coffee and they're still pulling bodies out of the rubble. Back to the Future. Marty is now essentially living with a family of strangers. It's not going to take them long to realize he has no knowledge of any conversation they've ever had or anything they've ever done together. Also, let's just keep that guy who tried to assault your mom around so we can wash our car. And why does our son seem to look exactly like that guy from high school? Finding Nemo. How do the fish get out of those plastic bags? They're probably dead. One of them even says, "Now what?" Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It seems as though they were meant for each other because even with no memory of each other, they still find each other and fall in love. As the movie foreshadows with repeating or glitching the last shot of the film, they're doomed to a cycle of meeting, falling in love, breaking up, heartbreak, erasing their memories about each other, and repeat. This one is heavily implied by the movie, but yes, you do need to kind of play past the movie in your head to really get the full impact of the ending. Get Out. This whole white family is murdered and the only survivor is a blood-soaked black guy in the uppity suburbs. Seriously, good movie. One of the best I've seen in years. But I left the theater and the first thing I said to my husband was, that investigation is not going to go well for him. Donnie Darko. Clearly, there are multiple people in that universe who have succumbed to an unfortunate fate they have no control over in order to save the world. The Road to El Dorado. There's a decent chance that Miguel and Tulio carried germs to the city that the natives have no immunity against. And there's an extremely high chance that Shell will pick something up if they take her back to Europe, or to any of the other colonies. The Never-Ending Story. Read the title. It's gonna come back around again, and worse, on an infinite loop, long after you switched that VHS tape out and went to bed. That gut-wrenching scene with the horse near the start, doomed to repeat. Beauty and the Beast. They had to start their life together without any furniture in that entire castle. Not having any furniture isn't that big of a deal. Considering all the servants were turned into furniture, I think the West Wing being full of shredded corpses is a bigger problem. Dirty Dancing. It ends on a happy note, but we all know they're not able to be together after the family leaves. My girlfriend in high school loved that movie, and every time she made me watch it, at the very end I always said, and they never saw each other again. The one that annoys me the most, even if I really enjoyed the movie, is Kingsman. The villain succeeded. Imagine living in a world where electronics can cause rage-inducing feelings. People would be abandoning technology in a world that isn't prepared for that. I mean, sure, people can romanticize living in the Wild West or hunter-gatherer, but there's a reason why people weren't considered adults until 13-ish. They didn't know how to succeed in that life until 10 years or so of training. Now you're dumping the entire Western Western technocrat society into such a state. They can't survive. On top of this, if Sam Jackson's penetration into various world leaders is as ubiquitous as it seemed, that also means that there was no one left to take command of the chaos. He didn't target just politicians, but performers and celebrities too. With people jokingly saying how The Rock should run for office and how people praise Schwarzenegger's reign as congressman, it's obvious that charismatic celebrities can use that to obtain positions of power. Except they're all dead. Anybody who lived on the East Coast from the Great Blackout back in 2003 would remember how tense things were after a few days. Now, instead, there's no one figuring out how to turn the lights back on. Plus, there isn't a few days of grace before people get violent. The violence has already happened. So, to set the stage, you have a population that just began attacking each other from technology. When they stop and look around, some old rivalries might have been reignited. On top of this, people are going to drop technology and live a life they're not prepared for. There will be no leadership or voice due to their eradication, which means that people are going to have to determine who's a leader. That is rarely peaceful. I know that there's a Kingsman too, but let's be honest, this is probably how things would have played out. Michael Banks from Mary Poppins is exactly the right age to grow up and be killed in the First World War. Passengers. Even if you ignore the Stockholm-driven relationship, the couple spent decades filling the spaceship with plants. Plants. As the roots of those trees grow, there's a massive risk of them rupturing vital supply lines. Or even worse, making a hole that leads out into the vacuum of space. Plant roots will push through concrete. That spaceship is beyond screwed. If humidity in the air was increased, there's also a huge amount of rusting that could happen. And that's ignoring that the couple spent decades eating the food supplies. The food supplies were supposed to be enough for a few thousand people for a few months. 2 people eating into that for decades, plus everything that got wasted during the film, means that inventory is massively depleted. Basically, if you woke up on that ship, there's a really good chance you'd die, either of starvation or the ship degrading because of all that plant life. The 2 main characters put 5,000 lives in serious jeopardy. Frozen. Number 1, the queen very likely can't sleep with her husband without killing him. Therefore, she can't breed. And even if she can, who knows what kind of mutant baby she'd spawn. Number 2, Anna can't marry Kristoff if the traditions of royalty in that country follow the vast majority of royalty traditions I've ever heard of. And number 3, the country was frozen over for at least a week or 2 with thick snow in the middle of growing season. Those people are gonna starve to death. I won't lie, I never thought about the food situation in Frozen. You're probably right there. War games. I've always been curious what happens to Lightman after the WOPR decides that the only winning move is not to play. He obviously had such a big role in helping to avert nuclear war that they had to let him go. But how do you release a 17-year-old back into the world after seeing all of that top secret stuff? My personal headcanon? McKittrick releases David with no charges, telling him in so many words, "Thanks for your help, don't hack anymore, but go study computer science at university. You might have a promising career ahead of you." Django Unchained. Sure, he's an amazing gunslinger at the end of the film, but he's in the South, pre-Civil War. He just killed a prominent plantation owner and everyone on the plantation. Just the sight of an African American on a horse stopped people in their tracks. And that was with Schultz claiming to be somewhat of a master. But now it's just him and his wife. I'd like to add, I love this movie, but if you think about it, after what happened in Django, I can't see him lasting long. Trainspotting. Even though Mark is totally supposed to be an anti-hero, you find yourself rooting for him throughout the film. After he screws the other guys over and is literally running away from all his problems, declaring that he's going to change his life for the better, you think just for a second that he was being honest, until you realize that he's a heroin addict with a duffel bag full of cash. Logan. Even though the kids get away, Laura will eventually be like her dad, the Wolverine, with her body and healing factor weakening as she gets older due to the adamantium in her. Cue a whole bunch of arguments in the comments under this post right now. Risky Business kind of sets Tom Cruise's character up for terrible decisions because he gets away with everything. Alien Resurrection. The size of that explosion as the spaceship hits Earth indicates major atmospheric turmoil, dust being whirled up, etc., akin to a nuclear winter. Goodbye crops worldwide. The Graduate. I thought it was a happy ending until my history teacher explained what their expressions on the bus at the end meant. Those two are basically screwed. No job, no car, no money, no family. Jurassic World. Frustrated me that the main characters literally walked off into the sunset. No, don't turn this into a happy ending. Hundreds of people died. And can you imagine the lawsuit that's gonna happen? My personal opinion, none of the Jurassic Park movies are worth watching after the first one. In Kill Bill, Beatrix kills him, but probably has a ton of assassins who are constantly trying to kill her now. And now she has a daughter. Things will just get more complicated. For this one, there's also the much-loved fan theory that the little girl from the first one will come back and try to kill Beatrix eventually. I kind of like that idea for a sequel, if they ever decide to do one. Elysium. Nice. Make people live longer in an already dangerously overpopulated world. Can't wait for the food shortages, power shortages, water shortages, and so on. Yeah, I don't know if they really thought that one through. Transcendence. Will uploads the virus to save Max. This instantly bricks the world's computers and deletes the internet. There's definitely going to be major implications because of this. Ghost. Patrick Swayze happily goes off to ghost heaven, having just sentenced Demi Moore to a life of solitude and celibacy because she knows he's waiting for her. Gravity. For a start, she's stuck miles from anywhere, weak, no map, shoes, food, or drinkable water. And even if the capsule is sending out an alert, there's no reason to assume it would be picked up, as there's no satellites to get the signal. Plus, the Chinese, whose Soyuz it was, would probably assume it was empty, because for some reason there was nobody on their space station. A lot of Ewoks died due to the raining debris from a recently obliterated Death Star shortly after the end of Return of the Jedi. It seemed like Jesse got a happy ending at the end of Breaking Bad, until you think about how his fingerprints are definitely all over that meth lab. Did Jesse get a happy ending? I don't know, dude had it pretty rough. The Island. You just released a couple thousand burdens to the state, crippled an enormous company, destabilized the economy, and put thousands of people out of work. Not to mention the unfathomable legal complications of having a couple thousand clones running around. Whenever I watch this movie, I definitely have that same thought, that there's definitely going to be some problems now that a bunch of rich and famous people's clones are running around the world. Harry Potter. Okay, so Voldy's dead, but now you have a world which is split down the middle and in a huge mess. People died over the year and in the Battle of Hogwarts. The Ministry would be so ruined from the year of management, and employees would be turning on one another. The wizarding world of Britain would need to rebuild from the ground up. Everything and everyone will be seeking recompense, and Harry would have a horrid time of it. He's the savior, and people will want to meet him, to thank him, to sob sad stories, and the families of the Death Eaters will either want to kill him or try to ask him to help their family members. Yeah, it would definitely be a bumpy road for the Ministry of Magic for quite a while after all the events that took place. Case 39. The monster is dead, but Emily's life is ruined. Her friends are dead. All potential witnesses are dead. Her friends and colleagues are gonna sue the pants off her and put her in jail because she killed an innocent girl who had already been through so much. Her career is as dead as the monster. There's nothing she can do to convince the society at large now, even though she saved them all. American Beauty always unsettled me because Kevin Spacey finally finds peace, but his daughter and her boyfriend next door are going to prison for his murder. Hitch. The dude lost his entire business and everyone is questioning their relationships. I'm not sure what he's gonna do with no work. The girl is a reporter who almost lost her job. I don't think she can take over payments for his place. Hey, Hitch is a pretty smooth guy. I'm sure he'll find some work somewhere. The Matrix Revolutions. The Oracle admits that the peace brought with Neo's sacrifice is only temporary. It was a crappy ending to begin with, though. Deep Impact. There's no way the world was peaceful, despite that rousing speech from Morgan Freeman. The Golden Compass. In the movie, the characters look into the blazing sunset while the music swells. In the book, a boy is ripped apart under the cover of darkness, perhaps 12 hours or less later. Ponyo. The The world is really messed up by the events of the movie. Ponyo gets to be human and to be with her love, but the world is put back to the Dark Ages, with most of it underwater and prehistoric sea life roaming the waters. All farming is destroyed, no satellites, industry drowned. When the petrol available is consumed, what then? Hairspray. The main characters get together, but Tracy was still wanted by the police for assault and evading arrest. She was definitely caught when the cameras turned off. Training Day. There's no way the three wise men and Alonzo's crew would have let Jake live after what he's seen. Drop Dead Fred. The imaginary friends are sent to children to overcome problems in their lives. Fred is sent to Mickey's daughter. What are her problems? And how come Mickey didn't recognize the name Drop Dead Fred, even though he remembered it from childhood earlier on? Independence Day. Can you imagine cleaning up after every major city in the world has been destroyed? Sure, the aliens are gone, but you still have to clean up 1 billion bodies and spend $1 gazillion trying to fix things. Groundhog Day. The guy has spent years living an essentially consequence-free existence. The switch to Iron Man mode is going to be jarring and probably fatal for him and or people around him. Forrest Gump. When you realize that Forrest is left alone with Forrest Jr. to take care of, and that both of them are going to be coping with AIDS in a time that the disease was completely maligned. The Pursuit of Happiness. Everyone is all happy that Will Smith gets the job, but they all seem to forget it's just an internship, an unpaid internship. He's still broke. He's still homeless. A few weeks of no showers, bad sleep, and no food, and he'll be fired and back in the same position he was. Death Proof. All the women would be arrested, convicted, and imprisoned for that car chase where they hit other cars that ended with them beating a man to death when he was lying on the ground helpless. Step Brothers. The guys start to grow up and turn into exactly what they despised before, adult wage slaves. Running the karaoke business starts to get boring, so Brennan turns to drugs. As a result, his psychiatrist girlfriend leaves him, and he falls further into the throes of addiction. Dale is devastated when his father, Robert, passes away. The hijinks are over, and reality sets in for the brothers. They eventually fall out of touch with each other. Chris Kardashian continues to cyberbully them to their respective graves. Wow, you really brought a dark twist to a comedy movie there. Lawyers of Reddit, what was the least defendable case ever brought to you? Probably my client charged with statutory assault, multiple accounts, who impregnated his high school sweetheart's daughter after sleeping with said daughter from the ages of 13 to 15. He was 35 at the time of the birth. DNA in the form of a baby is strong evidence for the state. I had a client who won just shy of a 7-figure settlement in a personal injury case. She then dropped into my office to ask me to file a fee dispute against the attorney who represented her in the personal injury action. That attorney took a little over $260,000 on this case. If you're doing the math at home, this guy took a 27% fee on the type of case where 40% fees are common. Did a fantastic job because the woman got nearly $1 million, and then she turned around and tried to sue him to recover any of his fees. I rejected the case out of hand and then got an ethics complaint for discriminating against her. It kinda sounds like this lady just needs to take the win. She's being really greedy here. A woman wanted me to sue her previous lawyer for charging her a lot of money but producing almost no work to justify his fees. She gave me what she told me was the lawyer's total work product, a page printed off the internet for which she said she was charged thousands of dollars for legal advice. She had already brought a claim via my jurisdiction's disciplinary body for lawyers. She had lost and wanted to bring an appeal. The judgment kept referring to documents that I hadn't seen. I pushed her to give me everything, and she came in with multiple files full of immaculate legal work that totally justified the fees she was fighting. We told her to get lost, but she wasted a lot of my time before we realized she was full of it. So this guy ordered a pizza, and nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done in under 30 minutes. But the guy assumed it because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later, and it wasn't even necessary to apologize. They brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he's Hindu, doesn't eat beef, and apparently felt offended. You're really fishing for a lawsuit. Sounds like someone's just looking for some easy money. A friend of mine was in a case where a guy was accused of graffiti vandalism, among other things, and the conversation with the judge went like this. "Sir, did you make this graffiti?" "No, I did not, but it has your signature at the end." "Yeah, an artist has to sign his work." Case closed. Some people really need to learn to just keep their mouths shut. I worked in-house for a famous character company with a large fan base. A few crazies a year would call in. A guy called in claiming that we stole characters that he created and demanded to be compensated. I calmly asked them to provide more details so that I can determine whether this has any merit to it. He states he designed the characters himself and gave it to the well-known actual creator when he was a kid, and the creator pawned them off as his own. I asked him when he was born, and it's a good 20 years after these characters were actually created. I ask him to explain this, and he pivots and says he also created some other well-known famous characters and brands. Characters and brands that are not owned by my company. I kindly ask that if he wants to pursue anything to send us something in writing, and hang up. I figured if he wasn't going to do some really basic research on his own claim, he wasn't going to spend any time to write it up. Never heard from him again. My dad had a client who went on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. The guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook holding guns, drugs, and cash, and had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun, as well as selling hard drugs on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling this genius he was going to prison either way and to plead for a reduced sentence, the dude still pled not guilty. We occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. Not my client, but my dad and the hospital he worked at was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Here's the situation. Patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed, but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery, performs it successfully, and everyone's happy. Except it turns out the patient's husband is quite devout and beyond peeved that his wife can't have kids anymore. So he sued the hospital. No firm would represent him, and he ended up bringing proceedings himself. Went all the way to trial, and he lost hard. Yeah, that's an incredibly hard argument to make in court. There was no other option for your wife to live. Either way, she wasn't going to be giving you any more kids. It sounds like the husband is only upset because in his mind, he's now stuck with a wife who can't bear children. Instead of if she had passed away, he could have remarried. The whole situation is just gross. The client lived on a large riverfront block. She had a jetty for a boat. Her large tree fell over in a storm and landed mostly in the water, making it difficult to moor her boat. She wanted us to sue the government for not taking away her fallen tree. That tree's your personal property. You have to deal with it. It's not the government's. I represented a tree trimming company that went to the wrong address and cut down all the mature trees in that yard. The right address was 100 North X Street. The company went to 100 South X Street and just went straight at it, hacking away. I still have no idea why the insurance company didn't just settle that pre-suit. Not a lawyer, but I was a jailer, and I used to pull double duty as a bailiff. A guy stole a pickup truck and was later captured passed out behind the wheel, parked on a sidewalk surrounded by a ludicrous amount of drugs and guns. He had elected to represent himself because he wasn't done being stupid. His legal defense? Double jeopardy. You can't charge me for theft, drugs, and felon in possession of a weapon because I've already been convicted of all those charges before. In short, during his jury trial, he admitted to doing it, but explained with a smug grin that since he had already done time for the same charges from another case before that, he couldn't be prosecuted for them ever again. This is not how double jeopardy works, folks. He's in prison now for 20 years. If he'd taken legal counsel, he easily could have cut a deal for 5. Surely this guy understands the flaws in his own logic, right? Like, come on, you're gonna go to court with that? A dad in his 60s hadn't been paying child support for decades, and he owed more than $60K for 2 kids who were now adults. He was basically living at a farm in the middle of nowhere, so no one could find him. He worked for cash, so the money couldn't be garnished from anywhere. He then came into an inheritance which was deposited into his bank account and promptly confiscated by family maintenance. He wanted it back, apparently. The dude's just upset that he finally had to pay something. A lady was sacked by a large company. They had caught her embezzling money to fund a gambling habit. They had clear evidence the embezzling had occurred, and she didn't deny it. She sued the company for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm represented the company against this woman. The case was so easy, the firm gave it to my sister as her first ever solo attempt. My sister screwed it up badly. Not only did she lose, the court awarded the woman $500,000 instead of the $300,000 she asked for. In the end, it was a good career move. The partners all knew her name and dropped into her office one by one to offer their sympathy. I would have loved to hear some more details on exactly how this went so bad. Worked in family law in California for like 2 years before deciding I'd hang myself if I didn't change career paths. In California, the obligation to pay spousal support or alimony ends when the recipient begins cohabitation with a new romantic partner. A guy who was positively getting ripped in half in his monthly payments came to my office and said he was aware of the rule about cohabitation and wanted to argue his point in court. You see, his ex was a narcissist. She was in love with and had begun cohabitation with herself. Her presence in her apartment should count the same as if it were a romantic partner there. He was bordering on begging me to take his money. I refused. Buddy, the lawyer's trying to do you a favor and save you some money. Just listen to him. My brother's a lawyer. His client took a backhoe, dug up a standalone ATM, and scooped it onto a flatbed truck. Then, and only then, noticed a security camera nearby filming everything. He got some black spray paint out of his truck, went up 2 inches away, really nice view of his face, and sprayed the camera lens. He insisted on pleading not guilty. I read a patent and told my bosses it was both invalid and infringed by no one. It had 10 means for elements in each patent claim that no one would practice, or that weren't supported in the written description. The partners, my bosses, new to patent litigation, sued on the patent anyway, using young, inexperienced, unseasoned attorneys in the firm. 3 years later, after billing the client millions of dollars, every defendant won by proving each claim either not infringed or invalid. Then, my employer appealed and billed the client another buttload of money, with a young attorney in charge of the appeal that didn't understand the underlying issues on any level, because he was a former teacher instead of a patent attorney. It was such a bad patent, no one would settle at any point in the case. My bosses were blood-sucking trolls. I quit for these and similar parallel reasons. The firm finally imploded. I'm a paralegal. Local guy in his 20s decides to go rob his dealer. He got the wrong apartment. When a college girl opened the door, he shot her and fled. She laid there for hours just out of reach of her cell phone and listened to it ring while her mom called. She lived. A neighbor found her. Now she's paralyzed from the neck down, and her face is very deformed. This is a small town. During the trial, the jury was shown just how strung out on drugs he was, and how he even bragged to a few friends that he shot someone. That's pretty hard to defend. He got 40-something years. The girl that drove him to and from the apartment was also given jail time. This one's just sad to hear, that someone innocent was hurt for no real reason. I had a guy who wanted me to sue the city because the city took too long to bust his neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. The guy claimed his neighbor's house had mice because of the garbage truck that was parked there when it wasn't hauling garbage. He said the neighbor's mice were causing his house to have mice, reducing the value of his house so he couldn't sell it. I asked him how long he'd been trying to sell his house. He said he wasn't trying to sell it yet. I asked him what he had done about the mice so far. He said he tried to call the city to have them get rid of the mice, but the city refused. I asked when he reported the neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. He told me he never reported it. The city just towed the garbage truck after the neighbor was arrested for some unrelated crime, a DUI. I asked the guy how he knew all this, and he said the neighbor and him were partners in the illegal garbage disposal business, and his neighbor's old lady told him about the arrest in the towed garbage truck. Like, dude, what do you want me to do in this situation? If you take this to court, you're just gonna go to jail too. Are you really thinking this through? I was representing an independent mortgage broker from a small town on the East Coast. One day, he just up and left without notifying his clients. Fast forward a few months later, and one of his former clients discovers significant mistakes in her residential mortgage paperwork that caused massive issues with the bank, costing thousands in legal fees to rectify. Naturally, she wants to recover damages. Only the broker can't be found. The office is boarded up for non-payment of rent. His house is up for sale, and nobody knows where he went. The only indication of his whereabouts was his Facebook profile. He was swimming with dolphins somewhere sunny with his teenage daughter, which infuriated the plaintiff. Fortunately, he'd paid his insurance up front and it hadn't expired, so he would be defended by us through the insurer. When I finally got in touch with him after around 2 months, he explained that he'd lost all interest in the profession about a year ago. Since then, he took on clients or helped existing ones, but with basically zero financial background checks and basically no regard for structure or timing of the transaction. He was rubber stamping everyone and everything. His work was so shoddy and his file management so poor that we basically had nothing to go on. He was dead to rights, and he didn't care at all. Then one day, he declared bankruptcy, signed the house over to a trustee, and got a short-term visa to live in Australia where his daughter was studying. We settled that one quickly as he had no intentions of returning for trial and we'd probably never be paid. I mean, hey, at least it's over quickly, I guess. We had a client skip bail and run. I looked him up on Facebook and he had posted a photo of the bond paperwork and a bunch of $20 bills. The post read something like, "Man, F the law and my bondsman. Can't nobody tell me nothing." Blah blah, typical hood stuff. We live in BFE, Texas. Dude is not a gangster. Anyways, he didn't realize that the only reason we bonded him was because we were going to represent him. We withdrew the bond and the case. In the motion to withdraw, we quoted his Facebook post and attached a copy of it as Exhibit A when we filed it. I have a relative who's a lawyer. She worked for a hospital on a wrongful life case that was pretty miserable. The plaintiff had given birth to a baby with very severe congenital deformities. The plaintiff sued every health professional she saw while pregnant, claiming that if they had told her about the deformities, she would have aborted. A quick look at medical records shows that the plaintiff never really pursued prenatal care. She went to a local emergency room very early in her pregnancy to get a pregnancy test, apparently common in impoverished communities. And she later returned to that same ED a month later with abdominal pain. The ED doc did an ultrasound on her belly and determined the fetus was not in distress. But he didn't do a thorough exam because he wanted to figure out where the belly pain was coming from, not do an organ scan like an OB would. But she sued that hospital. Then she was arrested for check fraud and saw a physician in jail. But she didn't tell that doc about her pregnancy, so he didn't do an ultrasound at all. But she sued whoever provides that healthcare. The jail, maybe? It's just a sad case that the hospital won handily. This one's a little more messed up, but it's come up a couple times now. If you haven't done your own due diligence and had the problem try to be taken care of properly through the correct channels, it's really hard to take anything to court. It's hard to place that blame on someone else when you didn't put in any of the work to prevent it in the first place. I represent condo and homeowners associations. One of my condo association clients wanted to evict some tenants because they were fat. I'm not even joking. Now, the law does, in some cases, allow the association to evict non-owner tenants. This is very fact-specific, however. I spent a long time trying to elicit from my client exactly what these tenants were doing that warranted eviction.
Well, they're just disgusting people. They're fat.
You can't evict someone just because they're fat. We didn't end up filing suit. My dad was a patent and trademark attorney about 10 years ago and worked for a pharmaceutical company. The owner of the company adopted the slogan, "Just do it," not knowing that the trademark belonged to Nike. When the owner found out that the trademark belonged to one of the biggest companies in the world, rather than change the slogan and avoid a lawsuit, he calls up Nike and expresses how funny he thinks it is that they have the same slogan. My dad got them to settle the case, and the catchphrase was later changed. The guy literally just called up Nike to say, "Hey, sue me." Luckily, I was on the other side of one of these ridiculous cases. I live in an area where liquor licenses are extremely valuable commodities. They can be transferred from one person to another, which is often easier than convincing a municipality to issue you a new one for your bar or restaurant. My client was opening up a new restaurant and found some wackadoo who had a liquor license that he wasn't using. I believe his bar previously folded. He agreed to sell his license to my client for about $250,000. The contract had a minor notice provision, something like you have to send notice of whatever in 7 days. My client's former lawyer dropped the ball and sent it in 10 days. Now the wackadoo received full payment but decided that because this minor notice provision was breached, he was entitled to keep both the license and the money. There's a doctrine of law called material breach of contract, which in a nutshell means you can only sue for breach of contract if the breach materially impacts your contract rights. For example, if my client had failed to pay for the license, that would be a material breach of contract. But getting a notice document 3 days late when full payment had already been made? Yes, it is a technical breach of contract. But no court in the United States of America would deem that to be a material breach. And certainly no court would let the wackadoo keep the license and the money. So we sued the wackadoo who represented himself. He fought okay for a pro se, but the judge of course ruled against him because his position was crazy. The wackadoo kept the money and my client got the license. In law school doing legal aid, my client was charged with uttering threats. He said something like, "I'm gonna put you 6 feet underground," to his ex-girlfriend, while brandishing a large knife. His defense was that yes, he said it, but he wasn't uttering threats. He just wanted to scare her into legitimately thinking he was going to kill her, because at the time he was angry and he wanted her dead. He thought this was a full defense. Dude, what are you doing? We were defending a hostile workplace claim. I'm speaking with the manager who allegedly threatened violence against the plaintiff. I tell him one of the allegations is that he threatened to kill the plaintiff during his annual review. The manager says, "No way. All I did was..." He opens his desk drawer and places a pistol on the desk in front of me. "Was put this gun on the table. It wasn't even pointed at him." A woman was getting sued following a car accident. I asked her what happened. She said, "Well, I meant to hit the brake, but accidentally hit the gas and rear-ended them." Well, crap, I'm not winning that one. As a former public defender, I'd say roughly 50% of the cases assigned to me were completely undefendable, typically because of some combination of video evidence, police wear body cams where I was practicing, multiple credible eyewitnesses, my client's name and driver's license on a pawn ticket for stolen goods, or my client just straight up admitted to the police that they did it. I don't want to get into specifics because of attorney-client privilege, but I had a few clients who, at our initial meeting, would say they were innocent. It's all a big misunderstanding, and so on. Then I'd show them a video of the police busting in their trailer. Client is on top of his significant other beating the crap out of her with 2 children under 5 present, and then proceeds to fight with the police and ends up getting tased and peeing himself. We could have won that one if only being on lethal amounts of bath salts was a defense. My firm had a guy call in about their son getting hurt at school and them wanting to sue. The kid dislocated his shoulder and brings a doctor's note to sit out. The kid decides screw it and plays anyway. Dislocates shoulder again and now needs surgery. Dad wants to sue the school. This kid is 17 years old. Yeah, I hate to say it, but your kid needs to be making his own decisions at that point. At the age of 17, he should have a little bit more interest in his own well-being. This guy had this whole story about how the cops came into his house illegally without a warrant or consent. The story sounded really good, and I was excited to get the ball rolling. And he finished the 30-minute story up by telling me that he opened the door while cops and rival gangsters were outside, and fired a couple rounds before closing the door back up behind him. He thought that as long as he went home afterwards, he could do whatever he wanted and the police couldn't arrest him without a warrant. If you open your door and straight up start shooting at police officers, yeah, they're gonna come get you. They don't need a warrant. What fan theories have blown your mind with their devastating logic? I like the one about the Rugrats. Ever wondered how Angelica could talk to the babies? Angelica is the only one who can talk to the babies because they're a figment of her imagination. She's spoiled, sad, and lonely because her mother is constantly working and has no time for her. Her relationship with her dad is superficial and unsubstantial. No real love is ever shown to her. So how did it come about that Angelica would have to imagine these babies? Tommy died soon after childbirth, a fact reflected by Stu never leaving the basement, inventing toys that his son will never play with. Chucky died in the car crash along with his mum, also reflected in the actions of his father. The crash has made him a pathetic nervous wreck most of the time. Most interesting is Phil and Lil. There never were any twins. There was just one baby. However, this baby was a stillborn, and Angelica never knew the sex of the stillborn, so she invented twins of different genders. Sadly, Angelica never uses her imaginary friends to comfort or entertain her. Instead, she's mean and nasty to them. She's invented this relationship with these babies so that she can vent her frustrations on being a spoiled, lonely brat who has seen much hardship from these unfortunate parents. Frustrations that can't be satisfied by a typical childhood relationship with a doll, albeit a Cynthia one. You've definitely made me want to take a second look at that show now. I read a theory about Courage the Cowardly Dog that said Courage is actually a normal dog and he sees the world through a dog's eyes. All the villains in the show are just normal people, but to a little dog, they seem scary. They don't actually live in the middle of nowhere, but since his owners are too old to take him out for walks, he only knows what's around his immediate property, and everything beyond that is nothing because he's never seen it. The story of Aladdin is made up by the salesman at the beginning to persuade you to buy the lamp. This one isn't really a theory as much as it is kind of the way the movie goes. You just choose whether or not you want to believe the actual story. Doctor Who. The Doctor's name is a word of power, something that was introduced to the series in Moffat's Series 3 episode The Shakespeare Code. What does the Doctor's name do? It unlocks the Time War. This is the reason he trusts no one but himself to know his own name. During the ending of Forest of the Dead, the 10th Doctor also states to River that there could be only one way she could have known his name. This is also the reason why the Silents are terrified of the Doctor's name. And why not? It would release the Daleks and the Time Lord from the locked Time War. Willy Wonka knew those children would die in his factory. After Augustus gets sucked up the chute, they all hop on board the boat through the Tunnel of Doom. The boat doesn't have 2 extra vacant seats though. It was designed with prior knowledge that they would lose 2 participants before that point. Later, they drive a cream-spewing car with only 4 seats. Did they have another car waiting in the garage in case the others made it? Of course not. Willy Wonka uses children to make candy. You kinda took a dark turn at the end of that one there, but there's a lot of fan theories around this movie, and a lot of them do tend to be dark. I like the idea that at the end of The Thing in 1982, when Kurt Russell offers Keith David the bottle and he drinks out of it, that the bottle is actually filled with gasoline from one of the Molotovs he was throwing earlier. Since the creature wouldn't understand what gasoline tastes like, it wouldn't spit it out. The original Scooby-Doo series is set after a horrible economic depression. Everything is abandoned and falling apart, and all of the villains are people who would normally be really respected. Professors, museum curators, celebrities, who have fallen into hard times just like everyone else. How many times have the gang helped someone not go out of business? This one is my personal theory. That 70s show is a vague sequel to Happy Days. At the end of Happy Days, Richie and Ralph go off to the Korean War, or at least they're training for it. Fonzie stays behind. At this point, you must remember that the Fonz was always the person who kept Richie cool. Flash forward 20 years. Richie, now Red, has become bitter after the war, and without the catalyst that was Arthur Fonzarelli, his friendship with fool neighbor Bob, or Ralph, has fallen apart. Happy Days was made in the 70s and set in the 50s. That 70s show was in the 90s and set in the 70s. I do agree that 70s show was definitely trying to capture the same lightning in a bottle that Happy Days had, just for a newer generation. You're definitely onto a connection there in terms of audience appeal and general timeline, but I don't think that the characters carry over in any way. The existence of SpongeBob and his strange friends is the result of radiation from nuclear arms testing that was performed at the Bikini Atoll in the late 40s and early 50s. Since they live under the atoll, the town is known as Bikini Bottom. In the beginning of 2001, A Space Odyssey, a black screen is displayed while music plays for a few minutes before the film starts. It's believed that this is the monolith tilted 90 degrees and taking up the entire screen, as if the entire film is a technological and evolutionary advancement that Kubrick is bestowing us. Sean Connery's character in The Rock is actually James Bond. He got caught spying on America and was hidden away in various prisons.
This man does not exist in the United States or Great Britain,
says FBI Director Womack. This ties in with the theories of James Bond being a code name for different agents. One that hasn't been brought up yet is Blade Runner. Ridley Scott finally closed the debate a few years ago as to whether or not Deckard was actually a replicant, and he totally was. But to take this one step further, he was a replicant implanted with the memories of Gaff, Edward James Olmos's character. Gaff was actually the top Blade Runner, but was sidelined due to some injury or illness, hence the cane. So Deckard was created and implanted with Gaff's memories to continue the search for Roy Batty and his friends. This explains why Gaff never really does anything aside from drive Deckard around, and why he treats him with such contempt. Gaff's origami also hint at Deckard's true nature, as they seem to demonstrate an insight into what Deckard is feeling. A chicken when he's feeling scared, a stickman with a boner when he's about to meet the smoking hot Rachel, and the unicorn from Deckard's recurring dream. It also helps explain the compliment Gaff pays Deckard at the end of the film. After he apparently hovered above the building and watched Batty nearly kill Deckard without intervening, he lands and says,
"You've done a man's job,"
which is the highest praise you could give a replicant. When it's all laid out like that, I hardly even think it should be considered a theory. It's just clearly what was going on if you take a few minutes to think about it. Okay, let's be honest, Blade Runner is kind of a mess. There's way too many different cuts. And as a result, we have all kinds of fan theories coming up around this one. Always that Deckard's a replicant, which apparently was confirmed that I didn't know. Personally, my favorite book of all time is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the book that this movie is based off of. If you have a remote interest in Blade Runner, take all this conspiracy stuff, put it off to the side, and read the book objectively, without taking all of this movie stuff into account. Deckard is a completely different character with completely different motivations in the book. The Jetsons and the Flintstones are two portions of the same society. The people living in Bedrock are actually members of a far future society, one may say post-human, that have rejected the day-to-day electronic assistants to live like their long-dead ancestors did, or at least what they think they lived like. This explains the talking animals. They're just synthetic creations. It's been so long since any actual animal lived that didn't have human communication bred and written into it that the ferals don't realize how silly it is to be talking with creatures that didn't even exist alongside early humans. How Garfield is actually dying of starvation, and just imagine John and Odie. There was a reference to this in a Halloween-themed comic. Garfield woke up in a condemned and abandoned house. He calls out for Odie and John, but there's no answer. He then wills the illusion back on himself, and continues his delusions about his family. To all you Potterheads out there, when Sybil Trelawney predicted Harry was born in midwinter, she was laughed at, as Harry's birthday was in July. However, it is a known fact that, spoiler alert, Voldemort's soul is inside Harry. It's possible that Professor Trelawney was detecting the part of Voldemort inside Harry as Voldemort was born mid-December. Pinky and the Brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. Brain constantly plans to take over the world, suggesting he's insane. Pinky often finds ways to ruin these plans. So, who is the genius? You just gave me a whole new appreciation for Pinky. I remember there was a pretty good one about how R2-D2 was Luke's father, and this of course was before Empire Strikes Back came out. Luke's father was mortally wounded by Vader. His brain was removed from his body and placed in life support inside a robot. This is why C-3PO is so worried about R2's operational status. C-3 knows that R2 has biological components. Turns out, Luke, who got very little Jedi training, isn't all that great. It's his Jedi father inside of R2 every time. Think about it. Early on, when Luke does something with the Force, R2 is always there, except for the one time on Hoth. And what is R2 doing at that time? Deploying a long-range Force antenna we never see again. This one is obviously completely invalidated by, 30 years of the franchise now, but I thought it was fun. Archer TV show. Whenever someone eats at the Chinese restaurant and brings home a tinfoil swan full of leftovers, they're going to betray the company. Episode 1, when Archer wants to break into the mainframe and erase and alter his financial records. Episode 9, Lana is going to join Odin. And there's an episode where Cyril takes a bribe at the restaurant and his bribe money is in the swan. I'm pretty sure this theory is out there somewhere else, but I've yet to find it. In the beginning of Finding Nemo, the father imagines one son survived, when in reality his whole family was destroyed. The movie is an allegory of the father's journey through the stages of grief. Denial. He won't let his son go to school because it's not safe. Anger. He scolds his son for venturing out of his control. Bargaining. He puts up with an amnesiac travel buddy to help him find his son. Despair. He sees his son flush down the drain. Acceptance. He learns to let go and let things be the way they are. Almost everyone in the story tells the father he has to let go of his son. His travels take him to the land down under, aka the underworld. The movie ends with him saying goodbye as his son visually disappears into the void. And the kicker? Nemo means nobody in Latin. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will was murdered on the basketball court in West Philly. The taxi driver is God. That's why we felt the cab was different or rare. God takes him to heaven where he lives in a mansion with his wealthy aunt and uncle and slowly works out his issues and hardships. At the end of Kevin Smith's Dogma, Bethany Sloan, the last scion, i.e. God's chosen to continue his good works on earth as a last resort should there need to be one, is saying goodbye to the 13th apostle, a gentleman named Rufus. During this final exchange, before he returns to heaven, Rufus suggests that Bethany name her son after him. She scoffs, but the idea is implanted. Now let's assume that Bethany Sloan, the last scion, names her son, the new last scion in the bloodline, Rufus, after taking his suggestion to heart. Does anyone know anyone from the future that is charged with saving humanity as we know it that is named Rufus? How about Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? That's right, Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is the last scion, sent back in time by God to save Earth by teaming up with an unlikely band of teenage heroes and historical figures. This is why I consider Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure a part of the View Askew universe. George Carlin also happens to be in both movies, but I'm not sure if I can come up with a link between those two. And in case someone mentions that Rufus was sent back in time from the year 26XX or something, keep in mind it could still be him. Time travel, you know? Or he could just be a part of Rufus as the last scion bloodline that goes all the way into the extreme future. Back to the Future. The Doc is ready to kill himself along with Marty in that parking lot during the first time travel scene. Not only has he never tested the time machine, but he claims that many of his inventions have been failures. So during the moment when he's about to find out if his life's work was a huge success or a complete waste, he not only drives the DeLorean towards himself, but also grabs onto Marty when he tries to run away. If that first time travel test was a failure, they both would have been killed, which is exactly what Doc wanted had the experiment been a failure. You know, when you lay it out like that, it does make sense, but I always prefer to think of Doc as more crazy than sad. In My Neighbor Totoro, Totoro is the god of death. Here are my points. 1. It's saying that Totoro is in fact a messenger of death, and whoever sees him will soon die. The hospital that the sister's mother was in was based on a real hospital for terminally ill patients. Number 2, later in the story, the villagers find a slipper in a pond, which is in fact May's. At this point, she's already drowned in the pond. Satsuki lied that the slipper wasn't May's out of denial. From this scene forward, the sisters appear to have no shadow. Number 3, Satsuki pleaded to Totoro and the cat bus to take her to where May is. While on the cat bus, she says, "Nobody can see us." This scene is Satsuki leading herself to the land of the dead by taking the cat bus. Number 4, at the hospital, the mother says, "I think I feel May and Satsuki smiling there in that tree." Why don't the sisters go and see their mom if they're already there? Why do they just leave the corn there instead? It's said that the sisters were dead at that point, and the Japanese pronunciation of corn is similar to kill child. Number 5, the final scenes seem to be a happy epilogue, but they in fact happened before the major events of the movie. And finally, the movie was set in a place in Japan where there was a case of a murdering of 2 sisters which happened in the 1960s. This event took place on May 1st, while the sisters' names are Satsuki, May in Japanese, and May in English. In the real-life case, the younger sister was missing first, and the older sister was seen to be looking for her frantically. The next day, the younger sister's body was found in the forest. The older sister was in such a state of shock and kept rambling ambiguous words about seeing a cat monster or a great big raccoon monster to the police. The sisters were in fact from a single-parent family as well. The mother died of illness. An alternate theory I hear a lot is that there are no children. They can't have kids because of the wife's illness, and the father in his loneliness is writing in his diary about the kids he wished he had. He's often seen writing throughout the movie. In Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is in the real world in the ending scene. He talks about how totems only work for specific people. The top was his wife's totem. It wouldn't work for him. His totem is his wedding ring. In the dream world, his wife is alive, and he's still married to her. Therefore, he wears his wedding ring. In all the scenes in the real world, his wife is dead, and he's no longer married. Because of this, he doesn't wear his ring. In the last scene, he isn't wearing his ring. Time to rewatch Inception and pay far too close attention to Leo's left hand. There's a theory in Ferris Bueller's Day Off that Cameron invented Ferris and he's living out what Cameron wishes he could be. Makes the movie mind-blowing. In Kill Bill, the bride doesn't kill Bill. First, you have to put her rampage in chronological order. She wakes up in the hospital, kills Buck, flies to Japan, kills everyone in the tea house, then comes back to the States to kill Vernita Green. We know this because O-Ren's name is already crossed off the list when she parks outside Vernita's house. In the process of killing Green, she accidentally does so in front of her young daughter. Her immediate reaction is shame. She tries to hide the knife behind her leg. From that point on, she doesn't kill anyone else. Bud dies from a snake bite. Daryl Hannah's character has her eye plucked out but is still alive. Then we get to Bill. They tell the story of the 5-point palm fist of death technique, but in the training sequences, it's never shown that she learns it. We're specifically told that Pai Mei never taught it to anyone. The other part that's suspicious is the play acting. When Beatrix first runs into the house, there's a play scene with her daughter. They pretend to shoot her and she pretends to be dead. This is what Bill does. At the end of the film, Beatrix is curled up on a bathroom floor crying, "Thank you, thank you." Who is she thanking? Bill, for letting her go. It was the only way for either of them to exit the situation gracefully. During the end credits, each of the people on the list who died gets a line through their name. Daryl Hannah is marked with a question mark because she was left alive. But Bill's name isn't marked at all, because they never killed Bill in Kill Bill. In The Matrix, people aren't used as an energy source. That's physically impossible, as it would take more energy to keep people alive than you'd get out of them. It's just the misinformation humans have. The machines were built to care for humans, and they're still going about that task. The machines think they're giving humans a better and more peaceful life. When people escape and try to free themselves, they're actually being let into another level of the Matrix. The machines realize some people need to strive and think that they're important, so they construct a false reality in which they can do so. The Sopranos. The guy in the members-only jacket walked out of the bathroom and killed Tony in front of Carmela and Anthony. It's the reason why the screen cuts to black. In a previous episode, Bobby asks him what he thinks death is like, and Tony says, "I bet it just cuts to black." The symbolism was pretty much hitting you over the head. How the family was posed like the Last Supper, how Tony was eating an orange earlier, how the episode where Tony was shot earlier was titled Members Only, how we kept hearing bells all through the episode. He definitely got whacked, and like he said, he never heard it coming. In the first Alien film, I always thought that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation already knew about the aliens and were looking for them. Not really so much mind-blowing, but I think it makes the film more sinister and creepy. I really love the theory that in Inspector Gadget, the inspector we know is actually the second inspector, built as a completely robotic replacement after the first was lost in action. He was loaded with his old memories, and nobody would have been the wiser, except that the original Inspector Gadget didn't actually die. A Upon returning from whatever disaster caused his bosses to give up on him as KIA, and now horribly disfigured, he discovers his replacement is living his life, even with his dog and raising his niece. The original inspector snaps and vows to devote the rest of his life to the destruction of the ungodly replacement. He disavows everything he once knew and loved, even going so far as to take a new name, Dr. Claw. After watching and reading Fight Club about 100 times, I'm fully aware that Marla Singer is also a figment of the main character's imagination. She's the living embodiment of everything he originally hates about himself, and by the end of the movie, he's able to live with it, as well as absorb what he needed out of Tyler. If you watch it in this context, you'll see clear hints to this. The meetings stop working when the things he's running from follow him there, being Marla. He's screwing her as Tyler, the idealized version of himself, but as a half-disgust, half-envy thing going on as Jack. Those who went to a private school, what was the best rich kid meltdown you witnessed? I know a guy who didn't get into a college he really wanted to go to. Instead of accepting it, his parents spent millions to pay for a wing of a new building to be built. And after that, the college accepted him. He still had to pay full tuition after that too, $60K per year. My mom works at a prep school that I went to. Important to this story is the snowstorm that had been forecasted all week. As I'm putting together my bag of ski stuff in her office, her richest student showed up at the door. This kid is a billionaire, with a B, also sobbing his eyes out, like my leg is broken or my dog had just died crying. The problem was his dad's helicopter was grounded in New York City and not allowed to make the flight to their private jet in Teterboro, New Jersey. Instead, his dad would have to rent a limo to take him to a hotel in the area. This was delaying his trip to Belize or Cancun, and meant that he wouldn't get to start getting wasted for another 3 hours or so. And he was just so stressed. I was going to a normal public high school at the time. There was this girl in a youth group I was in who put everyone else down. She would go on and on about how much her parents loved her and how they loved her so much that she got to go to a fancy private school. She would really rub it in, too. Not having a good day, grades not so good, sick day. Well, if only your parents loved you enough to send you to a private school like mine do. It was annoying and hurtful to everyone. Well, one day I'm walking down the hall to my next class and I see the principal introducing a new student to the teacher. It was none other than this girl. Her folks must have gotten sick of her attitude and decided they needed to put her back into public school for an attitude adjustment. It sounds like this girl needed to be humbled a little. This was probably the right decision parentally. A bit of backstory, Sao Paulo has really crappy traffic, and rush hour is just miserable. Hours to go a few miles. So this girl who used to be nicer when she was younger became a total witch in high school. One day, her driver picked her up in the wrong car. It wasn't the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, but a mere normal car. She completely ignored him, refused to acknowledge he was there or waiting for her to get in the car. So that poor guy had to drive back to her house without her in the crappiest traffic imaginable to get the Benz. Drive back in the crappiest traffic imaginable to pick up a spoiled brat who started yelling at him for being incredibly late. I'm 100% sure he didn't drive the Benz in the first place because her dad forbade the driver from taking it. Ugh, God, I really do feel bad for that guy. I can't imagine having to put up with a child like that. I went to a boarding school in the late 90s, and I remember a girl in my Spanish class trying, unsuccessfully but at great length, to argue her way out of a tardy because Daddy's secretary forgot to call and wake me up this morning. Do private colleges count? If so, there was a rich girl from LA who went to my college and demanded a private apartment in one of the dorm buildings because she didn't want roommates. Shortly after, she decided she didn't want to stay in the dorms at all and had her parents rent her a house that was $7,500 a month. This was in San Francisco, so I'm pretty sure most of you can imagine how expensive things can be. I went to an expensive private school on a scholarship and was friends with this girl Samantha, whose mom had security cameras in every room of the house and would constantly spy on her. Also had monitoring programs on the computer, the whole 9 yards. My parents mentioned this to me once, and being a stupid kid, I told Samantha. The mom flipped her lid. I'm talking calling my parents several times a day to berate them, to the point where they had to block her number. I was never allowed over to her house again. Samantha and her friends bullied me relentlessly for the rest of the year. It was pretty traumatic, honestly. I didn't understand what was going on, because I thought I was doing the right thing by telling her. This one doesn't feel fair to our original poster. They were just trying to give you a heads up that you're being spied on. For all of that to blow back in your face like that kind of leaves you not wanting to help people again in the future. I went to boarding school for 2 years. I was on a scholarship and most of the other girls were trust fund babies. They'd go skiing in Europe. Every week, they'd go on shopping sprees at the mall and make room in their closets by throwing out brand new, still with tags outfits. I didn't have money to go shopping, but I loved those days because I could pick through the new clothes in the trash cans and find beautiful things for me and my sister. One day, one of the snottier rich girls found me looking through the garbage and said some horrible things about how I was a trash picker, poor, and other stuff I've blocked out. I hid from class for 2 days because I was so embarrassed. A few months later, I was in the study hall late at night. Going back through the hallways to my room, I heard her sobbing in the hall. I almost walked right by, but I felt really bad for her. I stopped to ask her what was wrong, and she blurted out that her parents were divorcing. Then she realized who I was and started getting all rude. I gave her some Kleenex from my bag and told her I was sorry that was happening to her. Then I walked away. She wasn't super nice to me ever, but I think she got a little bit nicer after that, especially when her buddies weren't around. Honestly, it sounds like they're the stupid ones. You were getting brand new clothes for free. Let them call you all the names you want. You're getting high-end stuff for free? I'm not going to complain. I went to an all-women's private college. My second-year roommate was a disaster. Screamed on the phone as loud as possible with her parents if they didn't send her $5,000 a week. She wanted a new snowboard and had spent her $5,000 on going out and God knows what. She had a total meltdown in the hallway of the dorm, screaming that her parents didn't really care about her. I can't impress upon you how loud she was screaming. I was like, if I could get $50 a month, I was thrilled. But my parents never sent me money ever. How are you blowing through $5,000 a week? And even with that incredibly generous allowance, you still call and ask for more money instead of waiting until next week? Not exactly a meltdown, but a behavior issue. This kid was the senator's son, and in my history class behind me, he always acted entitled, and the teacher even praised his father like he was God. We get our test grades back, and he happens to see that I got a really good grade. For some reason, as we were passing our tests up the row for the teacher to recollect, he says, "Pick these up by yourself, nerd," and throws them all across the floor in front of me. This was in high school. I hadn't witnessed such a cheap way of bullying since elementary school. Ugh, this kid really just sounds like he plays up to all the stereotypes. My mom was an English teacher at a private school that I also went to, but her stories always seemed to be more intense than mine. Once, she was teaching a particularly badly behaved class, trying to get them to keep quiet and do the assigned work. This one stubborn kid decided that the best response was to say, "Why should I have to listen to you? My parents pay your salary." She flipped her lid and that kid barely spoke for the rest of the year. This isn't from me, but my mom, who was a teacher at a private school. Just prepare yourself. So for this kid's 18th birthday, he gets this sweet red Porsche, which he drives to school. He doesn't need it to drive to school because he lives literally a 30-second walk away on the estate where the houses start at about £3 million each. But he does it anyway because he's a tool. Because this beautiful car must not be forced to mingle with the commoner cars of the other 6th form students, he's given permission to park it in the staff car park, which is still commoner cars but on a secured lot. Around a week later, he's showing off to his friends by fooling around in his car in the staff car park, and slams the passenger side of his car into the back of a staff car. The staff car is an old Jeep from the 90s, so it's not the least bit disturbed or dented from having a sports car wrapped around it. No one was in the passenger side, and the driver was fine, but the car itself looked like a really expensive boomerang. Of course, the kid starts screaming and crying and complaining, threatening all sorts of legal action. My mom was his head of year at the time, so he comes running to her demanding something be done. But she does everything but outright laugh in his face and tells him he's on his own. The next day, my mom comes into work and some very irate and powerful parents are waiting in her office, demanding to know why the school wasn't doing anything about the fact a staff member had crashed into their son's car, and threatening to press criminal charges if the school didn't pay up. The kid's there with a massive grin on his face, but this isn't my mother's first rodeo. Oh no, she's prepared. Oh? Well, that's not what the staff member said happened. Let's review the CCTV, shall we? Obviously, the kid is now bricking it, and the parents agree to watch, knowing they'll be vindicated. Of course, it shows the kid donutting around in his car before smashing into the Jeep. The parents slowly turn to the kid. The kid starts ranting and raving. Honest to God, full breakdown. My mom was worried an ambulance would have to be called to commit this child. Eventually, the parents agreed to pay for any damages to the staff's car. The kid got a new car, but it was something like a third-hand Ford Ka, and he wasn't allowed to drive it to school anymore. It got even better when the next year, his brother came into the 6th form and got a sweet ride, and told my mom that that original jerk had been banned from driving it, as well as the parents' new cars, after he also crashed his Ka. This is a perfect example of why you don't get your kids this age stuff that's very expensive. At the end of the day, they just end up ruining it. I'm sorry, you can't be trusted. We know you want to show off to your friends, but you can do that in a Ford. You don't need to do it in an expensive Porsche. I briefly attended a private school for about 3 years. A girl that had been going there since kindergarten received a low grade on a Spanish test and went off on the teacher about it. She got her parents involved in everything and ended up transferring schools because the teacher wouldn't adjust her grade. Is that really worth all the trouble involved? Like, spend an extra night studying Spanish. You'll be fine. I went to a normal high school, but I remember there was a rich girl that lost it one day because one of her nails broke on her manicured hand, and she called her mom to come get her so she could get it fixed immediately. The school was okay with it because they didn't want to hear her whining about it anymore. It wasn't a private school, rather a public school in a very wealthy town. We really did have the best of everything at my school. My family's fairly wealthy. Some of the kids I grew up with, though, were heirs to vast fortunes. Insurance, DuPont, sports empires, etc. I was sitting in the lobby at my high school. This girl had just gotten the ultra-exclusive Dolce & Gabbana Motorola Razr. She was going on and on about how exclusive it was. This other girl rounds the corner and was like, "Oh my god, I just got the same phone." The first girl looked like she was gonna choke her out. She got the girl to hand her her phone and said, "Poor girls like you don't deserve fashion accessories like this," and snapped her phone in half. The other girl took it unbelievably well. I actually became friends with her after that. Turns out that she was not poor at all. Her mother was one of the heirs to the Sears fortune, and her father was a bigwig at Motorola. The best part is that she got her father to give her 50 of these stupid gold Dolce & Gabbana phones, and handed them out a few days later to a bunch of kids at school. I still have mine somewhere in the box. I appreciated the gift, but never used it. Shout out to the girl who single-handedly ripped the exclusivity of this phone out of this school. My sister cried as she got a laptop for Christmas. For the previous year, she wanted a laptop, but for this, she only wanted clothes. It was made better when my mom opened a "I love my rotten, ungrateful children" fridge magnet after my sister went upstairs. Currently in a very wealthy private school in Manhattan. Many are wealthy, and many aren't who are on financial aid, but culture in the school is to be pretty humble about wealth. A girl that actually just moved here was telling me about her $50 million trust fund and her daddy's private plane. She picks up her phone and I see a text from her mom. I look over and see what appears to be a long apology from her mom about something. I ask her what she's apologizing for. The girl explains that she went ape on her parents the night earlier for making her fly first-class commercial, but she was the one receiving the apology. I don't think I managed to stifle my laughing. Honestly, this is not funny. This girl's gonna grow up to be a horrible person. I used to work at a private alternative school for at-risk youth in the Northeast. Parents sent their kids there from all over the world and paid about $80K a year for their entitled kids to go there. Biggest meltdown I ever saw was from a kid who lived in my dorm. We had a status system so those on the lowest status couldn't have their personal electronics from the time they turned them in the previous night until about 6 p.m. the next day. This kid notoriously skipped class to play WoW all day long and simply refused to turn his electronics into me. His advisor finally convinced him that turning in his electronics was a better idea than not doing it, so he turned them into me. The kid came to me asking for his electronics a few hours too early, and I said no. Since this kid was 18, he threatened to drop out and literally walk home. This was in the middle of nowhere, and this kid lived about an hour or two away. I stood my ground and still said no, so he ran downstairs to his room to pack his things. I called the admin on duty, and he came and determined it was a situation for the headmaster to get involved. He also came, and the kid threw enough of a hissy fit that they both came to me asking for the electronics. I handed them over, and the kid calmed down, but it didn't end there. He decided he needed revenge. So one night, he and another student decided that they would spray my car with a fire extinguisher. The only reason I know it was him was because my advisee managed to get a video of it. The guy who was the head of the dorm next to mine was a volunteer firefighter, so he said to me the next morning, "Hey man, looks like your car got sprayed with a fire extinguisher." I didn't think anything of it, but he continued with, "That stuff will melt the paint off your car and etch your windows. You need to go wash it now." So I booked it to the nearest car wash and spent about $100 to save my paint. Luckily, the school reimbursed me and charged the family of the two kids for the cost of the wash. We're in a small town with one major manufacturing chain which pretty much owned everything in town. It recently moved its headquarters out of state and had an IPO. Anyway, the owning family, we'll call them Schmidt, had a Stanford-bound son who was attending the same driver's ed class as my sister, who had no idea who he was. Anyway, my sister, who entertains herself by persistently slightly annoying or flirting with random people, happened to make super rich Stanford-bound teen the object of her flirting. She flicked a tiny piece of paper at him, played with his hair a bit, and he says, "I'm Adam Schmidt," as if to say, "How dare you?" My sister had no idea that was supposed to mean something and just smilingly said, "Hi," then went back to flicking tiny paper balls at him. "I'm Adam Schmidt," he repeated. My sister was still undeterred. This went on for a while when he finally shouted in class, "I'm Adam Schmidt. Don't you know who my father is?" We looked him up after. Turns out he was a pretty big deal, and that phrase probably would have played really well with lots of people in our town. But to us? I had a rough time in public elementary school, so I went to a private Catholic school for middle school. I'm Jewish, but they let me attend, no doubt for the tuition, and just had me go to the computer lab when we did religion class or went to mass. One girl there hated me, just straight up would make fun of me because I was poor. My family was solidly middle class, so no. Or because my mom was an Eastern European immigrant and speaks with a thick accent. Or because I was a Jew. First time I had anti-Semitic crap hurled at me was from this little witch. Because I didn't have to sit through mass and got to play Oregon Trail instead. So my bat mitzvah comes around and my teacher decided to use it as a learning moment for the class. I explained what it was, that I get to have a big party and the whole thing. Of course, a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds are going to be into it, especially since I was the only Jew any of them were actually close with. The attention was off her, and she was getting more and more annoyed with it all. The Monday after my party, when everyone was talking about it, she threw a huge fit in the parking lot after school when her mom picked her up, because she wouldn't let her have a bat mitzvah. Apparently she had asked, and her mother had said, "We're not Jewish, and you're having a sweet 16 in a few years, so no." She lost it and had a meltdown because she couldn't have a party celebrating a ritual of a religion she wasn't a part of and wouldn't be partaking in, when she had done nothing but talk crap about me for being in that religion for the last few months. I still remember my mother picking me up that day, listening to her bray in the parking lot. One of my good friends got a brand new Audi R8 for his 16th birthday. It matched his dad's. He got all peeved and huffy because it wasn't the right V10 or something like that. Still good friends with him though. We go to LA some weekends. His treat, of course. I didn't go to a massively pricey private school. Most of the kids there were from middle-class families who spent most of their money sending their kid to my school, because the other options were just so bad. But there were exceptions. We had 5 math sets and I was in the top 1. One day, one of the rich kids decides it would be funny to blow his nose in a 20-pound note and tosses it in a bin. A teacher sees this and flips out. He says if the kid ever does anything in that vein again, he'll move him to the bottom set. Now, about 3 weeks passed and the moron does it again. The teacher wasn't bluffing and kicks him down 4 classes. Being in set 5 compared to 1 was like walking into a room filled with Peter Griffins. After 1 class, the kid comes back blubbering to the teacher, just as we were all leaving to beg to get back into the class. It was like chicken soup for my middle-class soul. I was happy for weeks. This is just literally a complete disregard for money. Isn't it also illegal in some places to throw away or destroy currency? I knew a kid back in 4th grade. He was a little demon of a tyke, real jerk to everyone and would lord himself over you in just about any conceivable way possible to get you to do his bidding. One day, some girl stood up to him and refused to do something. I forget what, it's been years. And he started yelling and screaming about how his big shot lawyer daddy was gonna sue her family for everything her family had. Come to find out, kid's been trying this with other kids and they all come to her defense. He turned bright red, like cherry red, and started screaming about how this whole school wanted to bring him down, and that he deserved everything that we all had. Really going to town on being an entitled brat. Ultimately, we found out that she'd forgotten to bring him his pencil he'd lent her after a class, and that's what started all the chaos. She forgot a pencil. Apparently, that was one expensive or one special pencil, cause he never shut up about it the rest of the semester, and would constantly harass and bully this poor girl over it. Kid wound up getting pulled out of school cause the bullying was so bad, and this little brat went around for the next year saying that he had her removed from the school, and his daddy was the one who had her parents remove her, saying she was worthless. He was expelled 2 years later from the same school. I wasn't there anymore, but apparently he'd brought a gun to school to try and show off how tough he really was. This one kid on his 16th birthday received a beautiful new Rolex. It was gold with a blue ring. Stunning watch. Apparently, this wasn't the color he was looking for, so he threw it over the school fence into the adjacent river. What followed can only be described as throwing a foot-long steak sub into a nest of hungry African kids. About 12 younger kids scrambled to retrieve this watch. From what I remember, his parents bought him a new watch. The right color this time, of course. Don't the parents of these children realize they're not doing them any kind of favors here? You're raising your kid to be a horrible person. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.